10th, 2024 meeting of the Laramie Planning Commission. Roll call, please.
Evans,
Present.
Madmore is absent. Heisler White,
Here.
O'Toole,
Here.
Priscillic,
Here.
Schneider is absent. And Moody.
Here.
That is 5 present and 2 absent.
All right, we have a quorum. We'll go. Next item of business is approval of the agenda and minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes or the agenda as presented, or do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Is there a second?
Second.
Second from John. All those in favor of approving the meeting agendas, say aye. Aye.
Hi.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, agenda approved as presented. Next is the approval of the May 13th, 2024 meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented or move to approve? A second?
Second.
Second from Jonna. All those in favor of approving the May minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Okay. So the minutes of the May 24th meeting is approved. Next item in business are citizen comments on non-agenda related topics. No action will be taken. Is there anybody out in the audience or on the screen that wants to say something? Seeing none, we will move on to Planning Commission and staff reports and comments. Derek.
Chair, Commission, just one brief comment is I would like to introduce your new Planning Commission, John Evans. John, this is his first meeting, and I know you guys did some introductions briefly in the room, but I think for Sylvie online, John is our new commissioner, and we thank him for putting his hat in the ring and being a volunteer on this board. And I don't know, John, if you wanted to maybe just briefly tell the commission a little bit about yourself or something, and then you guys can catch up some other time. But I think that would be nice for everybody to hear. So I'll turn it over to you, John, and then that's really the only comment that we have. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I say native of Laramie, graduated Laramie High School in '66 and MBA from the University of Wyoming in '74. Spent most of my time working back east in the power industry, but my development experience was in that, as well as when I came back, I was on the Environmental Advisory Committee and chaired that for a few years. So I was for several years when we were doing the Aquifer Protection Plan. And my primary activity now is I'm the developer and owner of the paddocks at Fort Sanders, which is a mile south of town. So it's just outside of the donut. But I don't have any active real estate ventures or anything in town, so I don't have any conflict with anything that's going on. And everything out in the paddocks is in the county. So look forward to working with you.
Well, welcome, John. Thanks for signing up.
Sure.
Right on. Any comments of the commissioners, things that you want to say or know that we should all know about? Okay, seeing none, the next is disclosures, ex parte communications, potential conflicts of interest. Seeing none from our group, we'll move on. So the first order of business is FPUD 24-01 Grandview Heights and Grandview Heights Estates Final Planning Unit Development Amendment. Derek, give us the lowdown.
Chair, Commission, the item before you is titled the Grandview Heights and Grandview Heights Estates Final Planned Unit Development. And one thing that I will note is if you look on your agenda, you'll have this item, which is the first item on your agenda, and then you have actually an additional item on your agenda, which is the preliminary plat that is associated with this current item that we'll be considering. So there you've got two separate items. Relatively speaking, generally the same projects, okay? What I'll do is I'll talk a little bit actually about both of the final PUD as well as some aspects of the preliminary plat as they are just simply kind of meshed together. You will need to do two separate motions. And then I'll kind of explain the differences of why it's in two parts. And then we'll kind of go from there. But just to give you context, you're kind of talking about the same area in the two items. So first off, to kind of give some definition between the two projects and the two applications that are before you. The final planned unit development, a planned unit development is essentially a zoning district, which allows for a developer to essentially develop a property under a grand plan, and under that grand plan can alter codes, can find new ways to do things that may not particularly work on a really broad scale, just current provisions of our municipal code. The preliminary plat is the common same thing that you've seen many times before, which is essentially the platting of the beginning steps of the platting of the property, which actually begins the subdivision process. So the final planned unit development, once again, is more zoning, the concept of the project, the broad scope of the development. Whereas in the preliminary plat is where we look at kind of the common things that we would see with any type of development, such as the subdivision, how the lots are going to be laid out, you know, streets, utilities, stormwater management, all of the aspects of the actual layout of the property. Following these two processes, essentially the applicant will have a final plat to then do periodically, depending upon how many they want to do the final step in developing the lots as laid out, not only in the PUD, but in the preliminary plat. And so to kind of spend some time now discussing the planned unit development. The planned unit development is part of the Grandview Heights planned unit development. And it's an amendment to the current version that we have before us. And really the Grandview Heights subdivision is largely pretty much all the houses that you see kind of south of Walmart. If you're familiar with that area, if you've driven down there, there's a series of twin homes. And then as you go further south, you have a series of single family homes all the way down to Bill Nye Avenue. On the south side of Bill Nye Avenue, there's a cul-de-sac, which is also part of Grandview Heights. You have the new Rotary Park, which is also part of the Grandview Heights subdivision. And then you have essentially two pieces of property. One that is kind of far east side, kind of near Vista Drive and Bill Nye Avenue. And then the property in the area that we're talking about specifically with this PUD and preliminary plat, which is also south of Bill Nye Avenue, but it's going to be east of Rotary Park. Through the years, kind of beginning in 2006, the Grandview Heights subdivision and the PUD, so it's been a PUD since 2006, has gone through the process of developing, building lots, building streets, building infrastructure, and essentially moving their way south towards Bill Nye Avenue. Throughout that whole subdivision, if you've been down there, you have pathways and open spaces that kind of wind through the subdivision, mostly kind of east to west, but then it also kind of runs up to, if you remember the lot that was rezoned off of Boulder Drive about, 3 months ago, those trails that kind of come out of this subdivision are planned to go up through that area. So it's kind of all the same area that we've been talking about a little more recently. You'll see in the staff report, I've provided quite a lot of background and just detail just to provide some guidance as far as, you know, like I said, it's been around since 2006, has gone through some different iterations of the amendment process to the PUD. So as times have changed, the applicant has brought forward proposals to adjust lots and prepare the subdivision as it's gone through to kind of really be more market driven as to what the needs of the community were. Most recently, you'll see that we did some amendments that resulted in changes that in 2020 that resulted in the newest homes that are going in there. They're just north of Bill Nye Avenue. Smaller lot homes kind of located at Bill Nye and Glacier Street. And so that was the latest amendment process that the applicant had gone through. Under this proposed PUD amendment, what we're talking about is this area that is south of Bill Nye Avenue and west of Rotary Park. And in that area under the original PUD that currently still exists, it was proposed for all single family homes, kind of medium-sized lot, single family homes. The applicant came to us, had made a request and desires to build some multifamily in that area. The underlying zoning is multifamily zone, which is R3 zoning, which is needed to accommodate that type of development still with the underlying zoning, but required that the PUD amendment be amended so that the planned unit development actually reflected this current proposal, which is 2 larger multifamily lots located up on Bill Nye Avenue, and then the remaining area of the subdivision being single family properties, smaller in size than originally proposed, but essentially accommodating the same number of units in total for the single family, but then also incorporating these 2 larger multifamily zones. Really under the PUD request and the preliminary plat, it does meet all of our standard zoning requirements, which is, in terms of lot size and uses. So primarily multifamily and R3 zoning. One of the largest requests being made as part of this subdivision, and I will talk just a little bit more about it, is the roadway is being reduced in width so that they can accommodate a little bit more density, which is a provision of the planned unit development process. What's interesting is if you go all the way back to the very beginning of the PUD for Grandview Heights, it was the main reason why the Grandview Heights subdivision at the time made this request, because under the municipal code, there were actually no provisions to do any other type of roadway section. And so the PUD process at the time was the only one that allowed for this reduced roadway width so that they could, build a different style of home and things like that in that area. So, that really kind of sums up kind of what we're seeing here. The planned unit development process is being amended, and there is a new preliminary plat, primarily because there's been more than 10% change across the whole subdivision over the totality of the time since 2006. And so that's why you're here before you with this amendment, which that would have been required anyway, but also the accompanying preliminary plat, which is your next item. To talk a little bit more, like I mentioned, the current property that we're talking about zoned R3 and has this planned unit development overlay on it currently. They're just going through the amendment process, as we noted here. It's also found in the Turner Tract overlay zone. The provisions of the PUD meet the Turner Tract overlay zone requirements, so there's no conflict there. Areas around it, you'll see are zoned R2 and R3. You have to the south county residential, and then you actually have to the west B1 zoning, which is business zoning, as well as the Turner Tract overlay. Generally speaking too, when we start to look at some of the things like our comprehensive plan, the Turner Tract plan, our Parks and Rec master plan, the PUD continues to align with those things. As we went through those different planning elements, not only does this amendment process, which is permissions of developing multifamily development on the 2 multifamily lots, but also developing smaller residential lots, all align with some of the things like that we've talked a lot about, our housing strategies, for instance. But also things like preserving the major street plan because Bill Nye Avenue goes through there, or things like the Turner Tract Plan or a future land use plan. As I noted also earlier, the lots as currently laid out meet the zoning requirements. So the lots here could be found outside of a PUD. They meet those requirements. Your street access is fairly standard. You have essentially two streets that will come off of Bill Nye Avenue. And if you look in your packet, we've provided you the plat and the maps that come off and kind of provide a loop road through the subdivision. You also see a stub out to the west, which provides you access to the west where you can where it will be potential future access to properties over there. We did not do that to the east because that's where Rotary Park is. So that's not there. With all projects like this, one of the things that I'll note, and as I noted earlier, is that within this PUD and as we note in the preliminary plat, the applicant is requesting a 50-foot right of way. I think that the applicant will probably be coming up and talking to you a little bit more about one of the conditions that we have, which under the current proposal, the 50-foot right of way will require restricted parking on one side of the street. That is not what you actually see in the remainder of the PUD to the north. And that is, though, the requirement of our code and what we are requesting within this area that's to the south of Bill Nye Avenue. But I believe that the applicant will be providing you some additional information that is going to be requesting that not be required, that parking on both sides of the street be allowed. I'll also note that we do have our city engineer here, and kind of when I get to the end of this conversation, I'm going to let him give him an opportunity to speak because he does have some specifics about specifically the 50-foot right of way and either allowing parking on both sides or parking only on one side of the street. With all subdivisions like this and mainly associated with the preliminary plat is parkland dedication. But I note this in this project here. Significant parkland dedication was done through the development of all the other lots that are already associated with this, primarily to the dedication of the land for Rotary Park, as well as the installation of all the trails and trees and infrastructure associated with the trails that are in the network to the north of Bill Nye Avenue. As part of this project, because the density is increasing, there's an additional amount that will be received through the totality of the whole subdivision of $89,680.50. So as each final plat comes in, that's when we collect those monies so that they can be used for parkland uses within the area. We're pretty sure most of it's can all go to Rotary Park is what we plan on doing with this. Stormwater management and drainage. With all projects like we see with this, the developer submits a stormwater management plan and engineering plans for the subdivision. Primarily in this area and kind of generically for a lot of the property that's south of Bill Nye Avenue. You have the water that essentially runs through the subdivision, eventually going into kind of a regional detention area that's at this very, very southern end of the city's property that's part of Rotary Park. And then it eventually from there goes to the south, which is into county. And then from there kind of crosses lots and then actually goes all the way south to YDOT right of way where it's conveyed in different directions there. Really that just follows the kind of standard drainage pattern that we see in the area and meets the requirements that we would require for all subdivisions of detaining and slowing that water down so that it doesn't impact adjacent property owners. This property is located in the city, so it'll be served by city water and city sewer. So for final plat or for final PUDs such as this one, we do have some basic requirements. One being that the proposed PUD complies with conditions of approval of the preliminary PUD, which it does. The changes here, like I mentioned, really are not changing a whole lot within the PUD, mainly the lot layout, which is this inclusion of these multifamily lots on the property, the two that are up against Bill Nye Avenue. Secondly, it talks about the layout and design of the final PUD being in compliance with the approved preliminary PUD. including but not limited to numbers of lots, parcels, streets, blocks, layouts, etc. Well, in this case, that is why they're going through the amendment process, but does comply with our requirements of not only of zoning, but of the grand plan of the PUD. Really, when we look at the amendments here, although the multifamily is being added, we're not seeing a large change in the overall direction of what this PUD was originally intended for, which was housing, providing good access, providing parkland, and providing that kind of housing within the larger, broader Turner Tract area. Third, and as I kind of, or also, and as I noted kind of previously, we included some information in this section that does note the requirements of the right-of-way width and some of the code requirements. We provided you the table that shows that the parking is only permitted on the one side of the street. And then provides just some information about how wide actually the street would be paved, which is about 33 feet in width. And what you kind of see in the previous areas of the PUD to the north of Bill Nye Avenue. And then lastly, just, does this PUD meet the requirements of our parks and our open space and other private, public and private facilities, which it does. For the change in the density, we're requiring the additional dedication, but largely up to this point, all the lands that they planned on dedicated, the trails and things like that have been constructed and built mostly to the north of the Bill Nye Avenue, but also the Rotary Park, which we believe, I think, is going to start construction this year. So with that, we do public notice. We post the sign and we put notice in the Laramie Boomerang. We did receive one inquiry about the project. They were mostly just interested in what was going to be built there, but had no concerns about the project itself once they learned the information about it. At this point, staff does recommend that the city consider that the PUD be approved as presented. What I'll point out is within your packet is what's called the PUD handbook. The PUD handbook is essentially the document that gets recorded with the county that includes all the details about this whole project. Past PUDs and the PUD amendments all have this recorded. And like I mentioned, the large change to this PUD is the change in lot configuration that you're seeing south of Bill Nye Avenue. So with that, you'll see there is some basic conditions here included within the PUD. They're fairly minimal for the PUD because some of the things that we have here are more substantial and more addressed in the preliminary plat process. So with that, I think I would like to leave the discussion about the PUD here. And then when we get to the other item, I'll talk a little bit more detail about the preliminary plat. But with that, though, I'd like to just briefly turn it over to William Winkler with our city engineering office just to talk about the roadway width. The applicant is here as well, so I think probably after William speaks, if the chair would recognize John Edwards with Country Club LLC and the applicant's representative and owner of the project. I think he probably has some remarks as well. So,
Okay,
and then I'll be here.
all right.
Okay. All right.
So what we'll do is listen to the applicant and then we'll have questions for Derek and the applicant, and then we'll ask for public comment after we finish our discussion with staff and applicant. Okay. Sir.
Yeah, if you. Honorable Chair, members of the Planning Commission, I'll correct one thing real quick. Derek said I was the city engineer. I'm far from that. I'm the senior engineer on the city engineer staff. So you don't have the city engineer coming and representing quite yet on this one. So I do have a couple of items, and the first one actually I'm going to take a step in a little bit different direction.
You're with the city rather than.
Yes, I'm senior engineer with the city. Yes,
Okay.
the city of Laramie. Yep. You don't see us here at every one of the meetings, but we do try and chime in when needed and everything. So There was actually two items that I'd like to speak on that are, they're mentioned in the PUD. I think they're both important for you guys to understand where staff is coming from with our comments and our conditions that we're writing. And, one was the right of way width, which I'll get to. The other one that I don't know was mentioned directly was the pavement cross section. So it's directly addressed in the PUD, where the applicant talks about paving this area with 3 inches of asphalt over 6 inches of base. And with this being an amendment to a PUD that was, what did you say, 2001 or 6 was the original? A lot has changed with the city and what we do with our standards and what we do with pavement throughout the city. And we've been trying to improve so that we can meet the council goals. Council goal is to improve PCI, improve or maintain and get, so that we can maintain our roads a little bit better. And I think everybody in the community would appreciate if we were doing that and able to provide a long-term product. So with what we did in 2017, we approved the pavement study, and it was an amendment to our 2010, I believe, was the original pavement study. And what we did was we hired an engineering firm, Dow Engineering did the both reports, the original and the amendment, and they evaluated Laramie specifically for what our existing conditions are versus what would be best for implementation at the city, and compared it to what was already being done or kind of historically had been done. So what we see here on the screen is a kind of a location of where the proposed development is. What we did is we evaluated all the soils through bore logs taken through various projects, various subdivisions, different things, all the resources we could find. We gathered as many bore logs as we could and kind of got a idea of what kind of soils you can generally find as you go around the city. And so what we do when we look at a new subdivision coming through or any kind of application, we start looking at, okay, what zone are they in? And then that will drive what is the recommended cross section for the roadway. And Dal came up with many different cross sections for each soil zone. Which one am I going to? There. So what we're looking at is that yellow zone that the subdivision in was soil zone 2. Unfortunately, the text box is directly over the two cross sections we'll be looking at. But what they did is they came up with, if you are an arterial street, a collector street, a local street, gave a couple of different options of roadway cross sections that could meet the desired, what we call a structural number for the area. And that I'll go into kind of a little bit of background on where they've got that from. But ultimately what we come down to is the minimum cross section for a flexible pavement, which is the asphalt pavement, not concrete, is 4 inches for this area. So we're looking at a 4 inch 4 inches of asphalt over 6 inches of base. And that's what's being recommended by the City of Laramie pavement study. That exceeds what's being recommended by the PUD or mentioned in the PUD, and then also outlined in the preliminary plat that you will see. So kind of a little bit of background on where did you go to point? Okay, a little bit of background. They evaluated our existing soils. Like I said, they've evaluated the traffic in the area too. So what city streets are experiencing for local street traffic versus collector street traffic, arterial street traffic. And as we know, the more traffic we put on a road, the more damage that can cause to a road, and more you want to plan for that. So what we see is the required structural number on the left side. So just in the third column there, and then in about the 5th column there, we see the structural number of what we've been getting for local streets in soil zone 2, which before this pavement study came out, we were accepting 3 inches of asphalt. So this is a change, and that's why when we see this amendment come forward, we're trying to bring forward the change that the city is looking for to get the better product that we need to maintain. So kind of moving on there, ultimately the design minimums for asphalt pavement is 4 inches in the city, and that's we got turning movements, we got constructability, rideability. One of the big things that Public Works is concerned with this PUD and with just the approval of a 3-inch asphalt mat would be consistency. Consistency from what we're trying to tell other subdivisions. The pavement study does allow for a subdivision or an applicant to do their own geotechnical evaluation, try and come up with an equivalent type of cross section. And we saw that request actually come through. We don't normally see it come through a PUD. We see it come through the engineering office. It comes directly to the city engineer, a request. And with Indian Heights, we saw the request come through of increase. They actually wanted to increase the base depth significantly and then go with 3 inches of asphalt, which in that case, the geotech did admit that the structural number did exceed what the city of Laramie has for a 4-inch asphalt mat. The problem is, and I have some language from the geotech that did the evaluation, but there's a lot of benefits to a 4-inch asphalt mat for the city of Laramie. And mainly that comes with maintenance. We get onto the maintenance side of the roadway. We are able to, sorry, that was the end of the asphalt ones, but we're able to maintain it a lot better because it allows for, well, for one, it actually meets the 20-year lifespan. It typically will meet that lifespan for what it was designed to, but also when you go to maintain it, we like to do, or the recommendation is a mill and overlay. And when you go in there and mill, the minimum amount you do is 2 inches. You mill 2 inches off of a 3-inch mat and you have nothing left. It all crumbles underneath. You don't have any structure out of that last inch that you left there. And so when we put in 4 inches, we're able to mill that out, and that maintenance becomes a lot more cost effective for the city of Laramie in the long run. And then you add another 10 to 15 years of life to that street. So looking at this as a consistency thing through all the subdivisions we've looked at, because I know we had the two that I can come to mind rather quickly are Indian Heights and Sundance Hills that have been required to use the 4-inch depth on asphalt. But we're also looking at trying to get this so that we can maintain these streets better in the future with that 4 inches of asphalt. So I wanted to bring that information to your guys' attention, just as some background of why you're seeing the comments that we're making. So moving on to the right-of-way side of things, as Derek mentioned, when the original PUD was considered and brought forward, there weren't very many cross sections or roadway, I guess, right-of-way sections that you were able to consider for a development. And so since then, code has changed and does allow for a cross section very similar to what's being proposed in the PUD. So in the PUD that we see, let me get there, is you see a 50-foot right of way. And so it's showing the 36-foot from back of curb to back of curb. That's roughly, you're going to be looking at around 32 foot of asphalt on that. So when you look at flow line to flow line, it is 34 foot. But that nearly meets this local PUD, and that's not the argument that our office would have with this cross section that's being proposed. Instead, it's as outlined in code, one side of the street should have parking and one side should have it removed. And that's for safety of movement of vehicles and being able to actually get your vehicles around each other and safely maneuver around curves, different things like that. So what we got in the PUD was what I showed just a second ago of the narrower cross section with the proposal of parking on both sides. If we look at this cross section, we're looking at a 7-foot parking lane. Most parking lanes in the city are about 8 foot, and that doesn't necessarily include the curb and gutter. So we're looking at a pretty narrow parking lane. Then we're at almost pretty much a design minimum on lane width as well. So everything's at the narrowest design amounts that you can do. So not saying that the cross section doesn't work. This cross section can work in a very straight section of roadway anyway. It would be preferred in straight sections. There's a number of curves on this subdivision. When we looked out at, so a little more background, this was approved with the previous PUD and it did have parking on both sides. But the city, since with this amendment, has evaluated how it's performing. And we want to look and see if it makes sense to continue on with what we're doing instead of just approving it just because it was done before, right? So we're looking at the roadway cross sections of how it's being handled. And we're seeing incidences where we're having major conflicts or where you have a lot of friction on the road. Sometimes friction is good. It can slow traffic down. But when you are consistently having friction on the road, you do open yourself up to the possibility of some accidents in the area. This is residential. We're going to have families. We're expecting to have families out there, kids playing different things, and your ability to see is greatly impacted with this narrow roadway. And that is a major concern. As we see on the left, if the cars are not parked on the left side of this image, they're not necessarily parked in the flow line. And one vehicle is taking up the majority of the roadway that's left there. The other image was taken today. I was in the area and I took a couple of trucks up there just to kind of make sure we could show just the impacts, what's there. These two trailers on the right side are parked directly in the flow line. So they're parked exactly how that cross section shows, ideally, and it is narrow. I mean, the mirrors on those trucks are they feel very close to those trailers. So to be able to traverse these roadways, it definitely impacts the public. And that's not with our vac truck that has to travel down the roads. That's not with the trash trucks that are going down the roads, any delivery vehicles and those kind of vehicles that we're talking about. So when we look at how it's performing, this is why the staff would propose parking on one side of the roadway to allow for a better traveling experience. Looking at that cross section, we did turn analysis on this as well. And this is with the proposed subdivision. And the design does account for some parking removal around the curves. But as you can see, this is with us being able to draw it on a computer in ideal world of driving the car down the road. It is very tight to all the lines. You can barely decipher the parking edge line from the edge of the traveled vehicle. So definitely some concerns with how this is kind of coming about. And then we look at down at the bottom where the bulb outs do help for the cul-de-sac that allows the frontage to be expanded. That was kind of the primary purpose of those bulb outs, but it does help traffic a little bit. When we start getting different vehicles in here, we're definitely going to have to talk with the developer about pushing some of that parking back further, or in the comment that we have, or the condition we have, parking will be removed on one side, and it will alleviate many of these concerns. Lastly, for Public Works, one of the things that we see is if we're forcing everybody to park in the curb line, that's not great for storm drainage, ice melting off, ice buildup, ice damming, which then does impact infrastructure. As you look around town, you'll notice a lot of vehicles do park up on the asphalt. There's nothing that PD can do to say that that's not a legal parking location. So we start putting out this parking in the way that it's currently designed, and everybody starts parking on the asphalt rather than in the flow line. We're definitely going to have two narrow streets to have two vehicles pass each other, and it's going to have to operate either one direction, or they're going to have to definitely have a lot of pauses to allow people to try and navigate a number of parked vehicles out in the area. But kind of back to the flow line issue, our streets division has been called up into the Grandview Heights neighborhood many times to chip ice currently. Will that go away whether we change this parking or not? No, there's going to be times that you have to chip ice because of the way that the buildings are facing and different things like that. But we're definitely encouraging damage to infrastructure if we're having everybody, like, forcing them to park into the flow line. So I wanted to bring these items up to attention as it's non-standard. It's something that we can definitely try and address through the PUD amendment. And I think that with this being separated from the previous Grandview Heights final like plating area, it's a opportune time to address it and try and get that corrected. So I guess with that, I would turn it back to Derek or let you guys turn it over to developer.
So commission members, there's quite a few things to talk about, I think, but open for discussion and questions to staff. Donald?
Does it make sense to turn this into a one-way street?
Honorable Chair, through you, Commissioner O'Toole, I have not evaluated it for a one-way street. Typically, you'd want to definitely be intentional about how you design that with couplets and different things on roadways. So I would not say that it would be ideal, but it could be.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, regarding your desire to just go with one side parking, is there anything planned or in the works that would allow for people who would normally be parking on the other side of the street to find another place to park? Because usually there's cars on both sides of the street.
Definitely,
Yeah, it's fine. Go.
Commission Chair, and I don't see you don't have a nameplate yet, so I can't address you directly. Sorry about that. No, that's definitely one of the concerns. It's definitely a major concern for the area, and being one of the offices that fields parking complaints, I hear it. I get some of them about, hey, this car has never moved from in front of my house. It's my neighbor's car, all those things. That's definitely a concern with the parking on one side of the street in a residential area. So.
And also, what about parking of recreational vehicles? And I know you still allow that, but is there any thought to not allowing that anymore?
Honorable Chair, again, that's not one that I think we just went through some of the ordinance changes about where they can park recreation vehicles, and that all kind of got adjusted recently. So I don't think there's a lot of talks about removing that ability from the roadways currently.
Third question is, what about snow plowing? Doesn't that require more road width than normal?
Definitely would, Honorable Chair. I would say snow plowing would. We don't typically plow local streets, so I won't even kind of entertain like we do go down those roadways with a snow plow. So it probably won't get down a local street, but if there's a collector arterial, definitely we'd be looking at that more directly.
I have a question. How do you determine which street gets the convenience of having parking? What side of the street?
Which side of the street?
Yeah.
Honorable Chair, that would be something that I would lean on the developer for on there. But to choose where we look at it is you have the option of these different cross sections. If the cross sections that we showed, a standard local street is 60-foot right of way, right, with a wider street section. If you're getting the benefit of a reduced street section, I guess that's the cost benefit analysis that has to happen there. It's what do we do with this and how do we accommodate it for the neighborhood?
It was up to the developer to sort of figure out who's a winner and who's a
What would be
loser.
best? Yeah. There's some streets where I would have recommendations, or you could have a conversation that maybe it benefits more or not with multifamily on one side that may have parking lot versus the other side has residential. That might make it easier for that street, but then there's another street that has residential on both sides.
Right.
Yep.
I can see that. Yeah, this is a problem. I mean, with as many lots as are going to be in here and how big American cars are and trucks and RVs, it's going to be quite tight. Donald's idea of a one-way, I mean, if some way to eliminate the opposing traffic idea, I think that's a really good idea to entertain under this kind of a situation.
I think that would be something that that could be discussed, but that would be something that the developer would talk about, I think. So.
Has that been done? I mean, has a development like this had both okay, to start with parking on only one side, you know, how that worked out? And then if the city has done any one-way directional requirements for developments that have this kind of density and geometry?
Chair Commission, no, we haven't. Really, this subdivision is one of the few subdivisions that's ever asked for a reduced roadway width cross-section. And most subdivisions aren't asking for this request. And so we've had limited opportunity to try it out, as well as limited opportunity to have the discussion about one way. We had some discussions, what was that 3 years ago, about one ways in the downtown? Yeah, you don't. Yeah, he doesn't want to remember that. But aside from that, I mean, as you all know, we have I don't even know how many one ways we have in town.
Yeah, not
I
many.
mean, not many, if at all. So, it's just not something that's done. But if it was so chose, maybe that might be an option to get parking on both sides. I mean, I think that's a legitimate question. Maybe ask the developer if that's the desire to have parking on both sides. Do you modify and go one way with the traffic and try to gain that extra space? I don't know. That's so.
Or one.
But right now-
Only one parking, you know, depending on what the space.
But right now, that's
Specifications are.
the requirement is for with those 50-foot right of ways, we're allowing the reduced width, but just restricting parking.
Right.
So, and then just to clarify too, I mean, all the multifamily product would all have on-site parking. That's a requirement. And then same with residential, single family residential still requires at least one on-site parking space. So there's still going to be your common probably driveways and garages and things like that. So,
Okay.
Okay.
Donald, do you have a
So
question?
you mentioned that the
John?
lots would be narrow,
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
that the lots would be narrower. And that in turn would increase let's say, the pressure on parking because there's not as much space on the street to park.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you're just gonna have more houses in that space. And then, when you think about a lot, part of that lot's frontage is gonna be a driveway, which you won't park in front of anyway. So, so there's already gonna be some limitations just naturally through how you put in driveways and things like that in a subdivision anyway, so.
With the widths that they're proposing, would that allow for two cars to park in front of each lot, each house or each lot? Or not?
Are you saying the width of the lots?
Yeah, the width of the lots is
Oh.
narrower, and I just wondered if there's still room enough for two cars without blocking the driveway.
I don't know. It depends on probably what actual house gets put in, because I think what you could ask maybe the developer is he may be able to provide you some more direction on the different styles of houses he's anticipating in that area. But I mean, a 2-car or a two vehicle width driveway is going to take up more space, and then there's going to be less street frontage. So if the driveways maybe are situated in a certain way, you probably will still get a vehicle on both sides of the driveway. But I think it depends upon, it depends on a lot of factors. I can't predict them all at this point because we don't know what the houses will be,
Right, each lot owner is gonna determine their own.
Yeah.
Design of the lot, right?
Correct. And if someone does a single car garage or a single car driveway, it may open up space on the, open up space actually on the street for parking. But once again, that's, at this stage, it's just kind of unknown because you don't know who's buying the lots and what exactly the designs are. So.
Donald?
Derek, do you have a number for how many vehicles are owned by people in our area in a multifamily dwelling and in a single family dwelling?
I don't off the top of my head.
But it's more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. 2, 3? Because that's an important consideration, especially if folks are only going to be able to have, be able to park one vehicle on their lot, right? They're gonna need parking space on the street.
Well, how many vehicles they park on their lots, more up to them. They just have to meet our minimum requirement, which is one. So most people have a driveway plus a garage, so that's 2 parking spots at least. I believe the developer probably could give you an idea of how many homes he's built with only a single car garage in the last since 2006, which is probably 0. But, so potentially, you're seeing a lot of houses that have 4 parking spots on their on site. 2 in the driveway, 2 in the garage. Now, if they fill their garage up, we all know that's the reality though. So,
Thanks, Rick.
yeah.
Okay, and so on the pavement changes, so just to reiterate, it's just a matter of the city saying we want 4 inches and the developer wanting 3.
Yeah, making that request. And so where we differ on that and then the parking on one side versus 2 sides. Yeah.
Okey-doke.
Aside from that, we're in agreement.
Okay. So is the
Yeah,
the
the
developer, yeah. If there's no more questions amongst commissioners on this? Okay, yeah, come on up.
Mr. Chair, members of Planning Commission, thank you for your consideration of these 2 items tonight and the opportunity to share some more of our background and the reasoning behind it. I will say up front that we have ultimate respect for the city and city staff recommendations. However, we do disagree with them from some of them from a professional level. And I want to say up front that our main source of reasoning has never been, and it is not now, we want to do this just because it's been done before. We feel that we can prove that there's a lot more science and reasoning and comparable municipality codes that enforce our position. But before we get into that, I was, as Derek mentioned, and first of all, Derek, thank you for that comprehensive introduction. These 2 items, there's a lot of overlap. And so I'm going to do my best to stay on the preliminary, or excuse me, the PUD amendment portion this time and get into more of the specifics about the preliminary plat as that item comes up. However, I say that if there's any questions on either one of those that any of the commission members want to ask while I'm up here the first time, by all means, please feel free to. So I should have started off. My name is John Edwards. I'm with Edwards Development Company, and we have been the chief developers of the Grandview Heights neighborhood since its inception in 2006. We began planning the Grandview Heights neighborhood and the process of acquiring the land in 2004. And I believe we broke ground in 2006, may have been early 2007, but this is a happy milestone for us and hopefully the city. The totality of Grandview Heights, the area is about 112.6 acres. And as Derek mentioned, we are now down to our last undeveloped residential filing, which consists of 12.4 acres. It's about 11% of the total 112 acre project. So as Derek also mentioned, Grandview Heights has always been a PUD, a planned unit development since the beginning. It's a more arduous process. It's a more difficult process, frankly, but it also comes with certain variances from what a standard applicant may submit. And as Derek mentioned, under the PUD, it comes with what's called a PUD handbook, which is, in our mind, is essentially the code book for Grandview Heights in conjunction with the city and per your approval. So as was mentioned, this 12.4 acre area for purposes of this discussion and to designate it formally, we're proposing that it be called Grandview Heights Estates. And so when I refer to Grandview Heights Estates moving forward, I'm again talking about this 12.4 acre area. To date, there's been 2 amendments to the PUD along the way, one in 2015 and then one in 2020. both to accommodate, as Mr. Teeny mentioned, changing market conditions. And if I may say, that collaboration with the city, the flexibility of the city to evolve with us with those market conditions, I think has been a net benefit for everybody. So in many ways, this 2024 PUD amendment is like the 2020 PUD amendment, where we are adding a new use, a new residential type to the PUD handbook. In 2020, previous to 2020, written in the PUD handbook was strictly single-family homes and twin homes. In 2020, we introduced what we call a cottage product, which is essentially a scaled down single-family home. So detached, single-family home, just less square footage. A lot of our vision and our guide for this particular project came out of the 2020 Laramie Housing Study, which is a comprehensive document, and credit to the city for putting that out. It got into depth on what is needed, what types of homes, their amounts, and even surveys on what members of the community would want to see more of. In that document, one of the most desirable products that was mentioned on all fronts was the cottage type of product. And so we introduced that again in 2020, and we feel that it's been a success. It's been very well received. Several of those cottages are under construction right now, and I would estimate that there's probably 15 to 18 of those cottage lots left in the sixth filing that was done in 2020. So fast forwarding to 2024, we're again adding new types of residential homes to the PUD handbook with the commission and the city council's approval. Those, excuse me, those two housing types is number one, townhomes. As Derek mentioned, up until 2024 and moving forward, there's been no single car garages built in Grandview Heights. The townhome type of product will accommodate a single car garage. And I'm I'm going to try not to get into the conditions of this too much, but since the items came up and they're relatively fresh. So to answer one of your gentleman's questions on the driveway widths, well, let me back up a second. Let me stay with the PUD amendment and the townhomes. So we're proposing to build townhomes in Grandview Heights Estates in this last 12.4 acres. Again, that's coming out of the housing study and just the general market of lack of affordable housing in the community of Laramie. It's, as I'm sure you are all aware, it's not just the community of Laramie that's suffering from a shortage of affordable housing. It's nationwide. It's a big problem, and we're trying to do everything that we can to accommodate that as we develop and do our projects. So we'd like to introduce the townhome. I think it's important to also go to the plat for a second. Other than the two multifamily lots, which we'll talk a little bit more about, we have 56 of, they can be called cottage lots, but they've been designed in a universal format to accommodate both townhomes and twin homes. Twin homes being one of the previously approved residential types in the Grandview Heights neighborhood. They average in size from 40 feet to 110 feet on average. And if a townhome, and a lot of this is going to be market driven on the type of home that's going to be built on this average size lot. If a townhome is built, it's very likely it will be a single car garage, which will be 10 to 12 feet for the driveway itself. I also want to mention on parking, just while I'm thinking about it, we can talk about it again, but we do envision and plan for a way to maximize the amount of parking within the garages themselves. It goes by a lot of different names, but there's something called a tandem garage where vehicles are parked vertically and not horizontally next to each other. There's also a combo of a tandem and a standard garage where the back of the garage is extended to allow for a third car for parking. We're really going to promote those types of uses to help address some of this parking issue. So we have the townhomes that we're introducing to the PUD, and we're also introducing an apartment use, an affordable apartment type of use. Again, trying to hit at the heart of the housing need in Laramie. We are proud to say that we've partnered with a development company out of Kansas named the Overland Group, the Overland Property Group. They would be the chief contractor for the apartments. They are planning to build on one of the two multifamily lots. They're wanting to build a 42 unit apartment complex. Their business model, the reason I highlight the affordable standpoint of it is because they apply to the state, specifically WCDA, and I'm not a master of their business model. They are planning on being here. Representatives are being here for the city council portion for any questions, and I can do my best to answer those as well. But from what I understand, and Overland's not alone, there's many companies, as we've learned about their model, that approach affordable housing in this way. They apply to the state for funding, and if the state grants that funding, they're able to pass those savings down to their future clients, their future residents, making it truly affordable. It's contractual. It's a no compromise type of deal. If the state contributes, it has to be an affordable type of product. On the affordability side, I want to say some things about that. You know, there's been a lot of talk about rising housing costs as that affects finished home costs, and I haven't heard a lot of discussion on what's been happening to infrastructure costs. And in our world, what we've seen, almost every single line item, PVC fittings, they've doubled in the last 2 and 3 years. Pavement, oil has gone up substantially, concrete. Now, there, in our opinion, there's a balance between being able to provide an affordable product and also doing the project done right. And we'll get into some more of the specifics of the conditions and the road width here in a minute. So backing up real quickly, the two amendments to the PUD that we're proposing are the addition of the townhomes and the addition of the apartments. So with that said, on the PUD amendment portion of this process or the preliminary plat, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Donald, go ahead.
Do you have any concerns that there won't be enough parking here?
If one of the sides of the street is closed, yes, we would have that concern. And it was mentioned earlier, I will reiterate that we have no issue with closing parking on one or both sides of the streets at the corners where there may be a turning radius concern. But I will also say if the condition is upheld and the parking is not allowed on one side of the street, that will still technically meet city code. So the discussion of the one way and things of that nature, respectfully, the closure of one side would be more than sufficient in our opinion. On that, sir, since you brought that up, we have several examples in Grandview Heights, and I'll say that these aren't our ideas. These are not our road width proposed ideas. These come directly from our project engineer, a certified civil engineer. We certainly have a lot of collaboration with them, but they not only come from them, but from our and other people's experiences working in other municipalities. I will say in Grandview Heights, there are several existing roads that are 36 feet wide from back of curb to back of curb, and there's parking on both sides of the street. Now, I cannot speak for the city, but we have not heard of any issue with the 36 foot. But in an effort to compromise to some degree, we've offered a 38 foot road section here. And if I may, I think this might help with the parking discussion. I brought an exhibit there if you want to give me those. Yes, no, I can do it. Yeah, thank you.
If you could grab him to Donald.
Okay.
Those are actually. Oh, I see. There you go. Okay. Okay, so I'll wait for everybody to take their seat. So this cross-section that we've provided here was drawn to scale originally. It still is to scale, but we had to stretch it a little bit from north and south to make some of the text a little bit more readable. It just didn't print out that well. But you can see if you look from the back of curb to back of curb first, so in our world, that's top of back of curb, and then you go down, you'll see 38 feet BC to BC. That's back of curb to back of curb. Now, again, this drawing is to scale, even though it's stretched from north to south. It's still accurate for discussion purposes and example purposes. On the second page, it's the same cross section. We provided some different vehicles. We put more full-size trucks on the parking lanes themselves. In our experience, we see people taking advantage of parking as close to the flow line. The flow line is the lowest point for anybody that doesn't know. It's the lowest point in the curb and gutter where water's going to flow when it rains or when there's runoff from snow and things of that nature. In our experience, people tend to want to get as close to that flow line as possible because it's safer for their personal vehicles from traffic going back and forth. The image that was showed under the city presentation showed a 7-foot parking stall, and our math is different than the 7-foot. We come up with 8 feet of a parking stall, which I believe is the city standard. And for smaller vehicles, mid to smaller size vehicles, there's even more elbow room, if I may say. We've seen this particular model be successful not only in Grandview Heights. I mentioned a minute ago that there's some existing streets that are 36 feet back of curb to back of curb. There's many more that are 38 feet back of curb to back of curb. Functioning fully, in our opinion. And again, the city may have information that I don't know or hasn't been shared with us, but since 2006, we have not had one issue. Nothing's been brought to our attention about the parking. And I will also say, as it relates to parking and safety, which I believe is probably the most important part of this discussion, is you don't want a street that's too wide, especially in a residential area, especially in a higher density residential area, because that encourages higher traffic speeds from people. And there's been a number of ways to try to address this. Cheyenne right now has a movement moving forward to install what they call calming islands in several areas around the city to make the roads more narrow and the traffic at safer speeds. If I'm not mistaken, there's some calming islands that were relatively recently put in Grandview Avenue across from the dorms, again, to reduce the size, the width of the street. So, like many other things, we feel there's a balance here, and we wouldn't be pushing back on this particular portion if we didn't feel we had good engineering, good science, and solid experience behind this particular cross section. Since we're kind of zeroing in onto the conditions right now, I will say on the pavement. So the studies that were referenced by Dow, those are all accurate, I'm sure. But what I heard is a sampling of different borings around the city and kind of an average taken. And in our experience, one of the most important things when it comes to pavement, road base longevity is subsurface soil conditions. And in the area of Grandview Heights, historically with previous city engineers, we could produce documentation if so desired. We produced soils reports that showed the type of soils in Grandview Heights as being non-expansive and different than some other more problematic areas. I think more on the west side of the city, you run into some subsurface gypsum, and that's a different conversation. I will say though, out of these two conditions, the pavement thickness, again, that's not our idea. It came from engineering and our experience in other municipalities. That is the standard spec in Cheyenne. And I realize Cheyenne is not Laramie, and I fully respect that. but it is a functional street section. And if I may say, there is some variance in how much when it goes to maintenance and how much you can mill. You don't necessarily have to mill off 2 inches and then be left with a little portion there. There's some alternative methods that can be approached there. But what I want to say is we see a lot more reason in the pavement thickness area than we do in this road width discussion. And there is a scenario where we'd be willing to accommodate the 4 inches of thickness. You know, preliminary, you thought you think about heavy vehicles as was referenced. And in my mind, I think of construction activity, form trucks, you know, fire trucks, garage trucks. That's something that has a lot more reason to it. That's backed by more science, in our opinion. And again, I wanted to share this particular exhibit because we could have showed just the cross section like we would, but typically, and as is shown in the updated PUD handbook, but we wanted to show a real 2-scale visible example of what it looks like in a real world scenario. I forget which gentleman had the question or the comment about the RVs. When that picture came up, I had to kind of chuckle a little bit because RVs are not allowed in Grandview Heights per the covenants. And it's a constant process of people violating and sending them letters. And frankly, it's been a constant process since 2006. So those folks will be getting a letter and that's going to have to be removed, and it'll open up significantly. So kind of got off topic once again here. There was a question on the road width, and wanted to provide you folks with our reasoning. Again, we're not just saying, well, you know, grant this because we've done this before. There's science behind it, there's experience behind it, and it functions properly. And again, you don't want to get too wide. There's a balance there. While I'm thinking about it, to the question on available parking in front of the homes with these type of lots, again, if they're 40 feet wide on average, and if a 2-car garage average for this type of width, for this type of driveway, would be about 22 feet. So depending on the type of the vehicle, you know, 1 to 2 vehicles outside of the driveway section, the driveway itself, and then the garage type itself, as I mentioned early on, there's ways to maximize the parking availability within the garage, which is what we want to do. And also, as Derek mentioned, as far as the apartments and the highest density use, which is the closest to Bill Nye, they'll be required to have sufficient on-site parking for all of that traffic. So I think we're really talking about the 56, 40 by 110 foot average lots.
Okay. Any other questions, John?
Yeah, you said that there's going to be 2-unit apartments or 2 apartments of 40 units each.
Not quite. So there's within the Grandview Heights Estates plat for the 12.4 acres, we've designed 2 multifamily lots. The first and the largest one is right at about 2 acres. It's 1.95 acres. That is the lot that the Overland Group is currently planning on building their 42-unit apartment complex on. So it'll be a series of buildings likely, but all 42 of those units will be restricted to that 2-acre multifamily lot. The other multifamily lot is right at about 1.5 acres. We don't have any current plans. No one has approached us yet. We haven't done a lot of outreach either, but our hope is, again, going back to some of the core needs of the city, we feel there's good reason to provide for another project of the apartment type nature on that currently vacant multifamily lot. And then everything else south of that, south of Bill Nye, are the 56 cottage lots, townhome lots, twin home lots. They can accommodate any one of those 3 products.
Do you anticipated that the added density of this area, which is obviously what you're seeking to do, is going to create more pressure on these roadways?
You know, not with the current roadways, how they're designed and how they're proposed. I say that because number one, Bill Nye I forget the classification of Bill Nye, but it's a 5-lane thoroughfare, 2 travel lanes on either side and then a center turn lane, which I'm not a traffic engineer, but that's designed to accommodate a significant amount more of traffic than what Grandview Heights Estates is proposing. So I would say that, and then you have the 56 units themselves. You have the apartment complex that we know of at this time, the 42 units that are going to have their own on-site parking. And so, no, I don't anticipate it creating any undue burden or stress on the existing or the proposed streets. I see Bill Nye, frankly, probably oversized for a project of this nature. And again, the internal streets, we feel good about proposing.
Couple questions I have.
Sure.
So, are we dealing with that future storage area at all to the east?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay, so that's a different.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
So that'll go. So the drainage,
Yes.
can you elaborate on the drainage coming off of this western development into City Park, into, Derek said that there was a detention pond at the south
Yes.
end.
Yes.
And then the water then drains off of that detention pond and goes onto County Road.
Correct.
So it would be draining off of the park onto private land.
Yes.
Are they established drainages? Is there permission needed by the county resident? What's the process of collecting water from this stormwater from this development and discharging into adjacent
Sure.
private property?
No, that's a good question. So the drainage for what is now known as Grandview Heights Estates was studied and solidified. I forget the year, but it was done in conjunction with Grandview Heights 7th filing, which is Plateau Court. It's the 22 twin home lots that Derek referenced that is currently the only residential use that extends south of Mill Nye. So the drainage and for the whole area, Grandview Heights Estates area included, was done at that time. It was then restudied and done again, recertified with this current proposal here. I will say that although we're increasing the density from the previous design to what we're proposing here, I think the original design was somewhere around 42 of what I would consider more larger standard single family lots, 70 feet wide by 115 feet in depth. The road network didn't hardly change at all. There was a 15-foot southern shift of Sitting Bull Trail to accommodate some of the apartment uses. But the reason I bring that up is because the hard surface account for the rain that comes down and the runoff, it didn't change too much. You still have the water being directed into the streets in most cases, on into the storm sewer system, out into the park. And as mentioned, and I'm going to get to that part of your question, here in a moment, and on through south into the county property, that drainage eventually makes its way to Interstate 80 and is distributed. It's not like there's one point of distribution. It hits a point. It's kind of being eliminated gradually as it goes along there. So what is allowed and what we were tasked with was preserving historic flows for the drainage. And so again, when we did Grandview Heights 7th filing and we did the first initial study, we were required to build the drainage improvements for the whole area, including the Grandview Heights Estates area at that time, as a condition of building the 7th filing. And that basically consisted of building a long berm that's sized by drainage engineers and professionals above my pay grade, and then a certain sized culvert pipe that size is directly related to the amount of flow that's allowed to come out at a given time. I will say that the overall drainage area, the park that it's in is, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but it's about 7.5 acres total. The dam or the berm, I should say, on the far end that we built in conjunction with the 7th filing, designed for not only the 7th filing, but also the Grandview Heights area, at full capacity, if you will, if we get a big rainstorm or a snowstorm and a big melt, it's a really shallow, big area for what would be a temporary holding pond type area. And again, going back to the size of that culvert that we put through the pipe, it'll be timed to be released at a specific rate that matches historical runoff.
So, as was mentioned in the staff report, everything south of Bill Nye is going into the park. As opposed to, the other development to the north is going into another detention pond. And so this detention pond, this shallow bermed area that you're talking about at Rotary Park, then is gonna hold water from storm drainage off of this development.
Hold it back from a
Hold it
deluge.
back.
Yeah.
And that via the culvert or the ability to release water from the detention pond is going to not increase historic flows
That's right.
into the drainage that exists prior, and that all of this area that's being developed, did that water naturally go to this drainage?
Yes,
So this development represents a singular watershed, so to speak.
yes.
And it's not changing the surface flow characteristics. That's what the engineers are saying?
That's correct.
Okay,
And, it's also my understanding for whatever it's worth, that the Rotary Park, when the improvements are built out, and Derek, anybody correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's going to be substantially irrigated ground or natural ground. And there's an aquifer recharge zone in this area. The soil is really pervious. It really sucks up water quickly. We've done several tests on it. So you're going to be getting the benefit of the design, which is always designed to be a little bit oversized from a 50 or 100-year event. But you're also going to have, and I don't think that's really
I
been
mean,
discussed.
infiltration from the detention
Exactly,
pond,
exactly.
rather than
Yes.
just the natural.
Correct. It's far from all being hard surface.
Is there any way to hold it back for a period of time and then slowly release it? So that the detention pond actually serves to retain water for a while,
That's exactly the,
as opposed to
Correct.
just filling up and then releasing, there'd be some way to control.
that's exactly what the current design and how that berm was built to function. So
So some would be stored
yes,
until it got to a point in which it started spilling over into the drainage.
yes, I would liken it to a bathtub, that culvert's at a
Spill.
certain size, spillway, exactly. So the water fills up and it releases at its historic rate.
Okay. All right. Sure. Yes. There.
Chair, and I think just to add on to that conversation, for all subdivisions, what the city does is retains those historic flows. We make sure that no matter whatever the development that's occurring in that area isn't creating additional impact off-site wherever that water goes. And sometimes it's one place, other times it's 3 places. And so we have to evaluate that, as well as have the applicant's engineer do that, but also the city engineering staff look at that and make sure that we aren't doing, creating impact on those adjacent properties, whether it goes to city property or the county property, we still look at that. So just want to make that clear. That happens here in this subdivision and in all subdivisions. It actually happens even on a development level. So just when we see developments occur on a singular site, an existing property, you build a parking lot that's got a lot of stormwater runoff. We do the exact same thing. Within that property, it has to be held back at that historic rate wherever that water goes, even if it goes into our street. So that's kind of that fundamental process we do for everybody so that we don't create downstream impacts as the long-term goal. So,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Donald, I mean, your comment about a one-way pattern, it really looks like makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can envision a one-way pattern through here that would really do the job. I mean, it wouldn't be, I don't know why in this small kind of cul-de-sac-y development that has circular patterns to it, that a one-way pattern wouldn't work just beautifully,
So why don't you
or
ask,
worth considering anyways.
so does that cause you heartburn if it's a one-way?
It does
Why?
significantly. And I would think the city may share some of these concerns. Number one, it's hurting the functionality and the flow of the traffic going through it. If people are restricted to go to one way and then go all the way back around, I just, again, if I thought there was good reason and science behind a one-way road on a 38-foot back of curb to back of curb street section, I would be all about it. But trash trucks, mail delivery, you know, the folks living in the apartment and hopefully a future apartment project. I mean, it would be like putting a set of handcuffs. It's what it feels like. And so we would be more inclined if that was the direction that the planning commission would want to go, we'd be more inclined to stay with the city code that's allows for a 38-foot back of curb and no parking on one side of the street.
Okay, good to know.
Yes, sir.
Donald, you have a question?
Two quick questions. One is probably wildly inappropriate, but I'll ask it. The other question is, are trailers allowed trailers are not allowed in the
No.
subdivision?
Trailers, RVs, project cars, if you will.
Okay. The other question I had was, and I guess I'm approaching this from the standpoint of someone who was born in Ireland, lived in Ireland, and there are lords in England named after places in Ireland that they had colonized. Is it appropriate to name streets after Native Americans?
You know, I believe so because comes from a position of honoring them.
Have they been asked?
I'm sorry?
Have they been asked?
No, we have not reached out. Something we'd be happy to do though.
Okay, to me, it seems like that could be a sore point for Native Americans who were here first.
Sure. And I can sympathize with that. We'd be happy to reach out. You know, for whatever it's worth, I'm a 4th generation Cheyenne native. Most of our family came to Laramie and graduated from the University of Wyoming, me included. We care very much for the community. We carry a Western heritage in our heart. And that comes with Native Americans and cowboys. And we have respect for both parties and everything the horrible things that the Native Americans had to go through. I mean, it's an honor in a lot of places to get a street named after you. And so we're proud to do that.
Okay, well, only the Indians were ethnically cleansed from this state, not the cowboys. So I just think it would be appropriate.
Sure. Be happy to do that.
Just leave it at that.
Do you have any suggestions on who exactly to reach out to?
No idea. I'm not a Native American.
Okay, we'd be happy to.
I might be able to get your reference.
That'd be great. Can I say one last thing on the one-way streets? I would also, as we often do, ask yourself to put yourself in a position of if you were going to invest in a home in this location, how you would feel about a one-way thoroughfare all the way through there.
Actually, looking at it, I don't think it'd be a problem at all. That's just my opinion.
No, fair enough.
I mean, because you whether you're coming from this way or that way, there's really very, very few inconvenienced people in a one-way situation in my view, depending upon obviously the ones furthest away from the entrance point of one way, but I don't know, it's a trade-off.
Sure.
And it's you know, I know how congested the streets are with the big fat American trucks and giant side view mirrors, and everyone's running, you know, everything's big. And if you're just doing one way, it just seems like a very simple, elegant opportunity. But if in your opinion that it's a non-starter, then
I think it would make it more dangerous too. I think you're going to facilitate higher traffic speeds because you're opening up a thoroughfare there. But
you have parking on both sides.
Exactly. I mean, if you did both parking on both sides of this current cross section here, you'd have a 20-foot drive lane down the middle, one way. And in my mind, that's more dangerous. And I respect everybody's opinion. I certainly respect
No,
yours.
you're-
And
you're
I can say for me and folks that we've worked with and talked to, I would not want to live in a, an all one-way area unless it absolutely needed to be that way.
Okay. All right. John?
I have a question, one clarification on the RV. So you can't park one in a driveway, they're just banned holistically. Those people park them in yards.
Yes, so the covenant's written, so they can't be parked on the streets. They cannot be parked in driveways. There is an allowance for them to be parked within the lot itself at a designated built area. So within the backyard fence through a gate, that is allowed.
So it doesn't really influence parking. That's
No,
what I was
it
getting.
shouldn't.
You park that in your driveway, and you can't park your car on the street.
Derek?
Sure. Sylvie got her hand up. I don't know if she's.
I'm sorry, Sylvie.
Sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to echo that I really like the one ways too, and they are safer. They're safer for pedestrians. They have reduced conflicts. They slower speeds, clear traffic flow. So I mean, I just want to raise my hand to say that I think the one way is a great idea.
Thank you. Any other any other comments, John?
Yeah, you mentioned several times that your intent is to increase the density in this neighborhood, this 11 acres. What is the increase? Is it, versus the regular Grandview?
Sure.
neighborhoods?
So as I think we may have touched on briefly, the original design, the 2006 design for this 12.4 acre area that we're now calling Grandview Heights Estates, it consisted of all, again, the larger, what I would consider standard single family lots. And I believe there were 42 originally. I'm going to have to double check that count for you. The density has increased from 42 to 56 lots just on if we're looking at just the 56 cottage, townhome, twin home type of lots. But then you have the 42 units for the known apartment complex that would like to come in, and then the unknown for the 1.5. So there is an increase, but it's by design. We're trying to bring in more attainable, more affordable housing for the community. Bill Nye takes care of a lot of that as far as increased traffic flows and things of that nature, being a 5-lane.
It sounds to me like just a rough calculation is you're looking at about a 40% increase in density.
I have not quantified it. But I will also say, as was mentioned, actually the original 2006 design, the 42 single family, that was against the existing underlying R3 zone. And so with this change that we're proposing, we're getting much more back in line with the originally intended R3 zone.
Okay.
Yeah, John?
I have a question about the 3 versus 4 inch. road
Sure.
surface. Are there any cons to a 4-inch surface? Any drawbacks aside from cost? There's considerations like that, but is there any drawback?
No, not that I know of. The only one would be cost. But I do want to point out any benefit on the cost to us at the front end as the developers would also be passed on to the homeowner at the end of the day, because our lots are reflective of all of the materials and the costs that it takes to create an improved lot. And it would also be a net benefit to the city from our standpoint. When you go to future maintenance and replacement, it's less area. So any individualized perceived benefits, I think it's important to point out that it would, from our standpoint, it would benefit everybody. But to answer your question, any downside on the 4-inch, I don't see any. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we feel that there's a lot more reason and science behind the 4-inch.
I didn't track the benefit to the city. Can you explain that?
Sure. Less material costs for us would be less material costs for the city when it comes to be replacing the same elements.
Yeah, 20 years from now, they're having 4 inches again, so.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I get that.
Okay, if there's no other questions from commission, we'll open it up to public. uh, Go ahead. Yeah, forget your name.
Yeah, William Winkler with the engineering division.
Wayne?
I just wanted to reiterate through chair over to can't see your last name, sorry, but Miss Hessler White. Just kind of the clarification on that is the cost that the city was looking at later on in life with a 4-inch versus 3-inch is we would be removing only half of that material and able to preserve the bottom half. When you put a 3-inch in there, we can't preserve that last inch. So then we are pretty much forced into replacing 3 inches for 3 inches instead of being able to do an overlay of 2 inches underneath or removal 2 inches and placement of 2 inches.
So there is no.
In my perspective, it costs more for us to maintain a 3-inch.
Full scale excavate, re-pour as opposed to like you said, the furnish.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Wait. Okay, public comments on this topic. Yes, if you could state your name and come to the podium and 3 minutes to make your piece. Thank you.
Name is Bob Moore. I'm a resident of the county, but I have property here in the city. One of my comments has to do with the flow at the bottom of the curb and runoff from rain and melted snow. People tend to park there because the people who get out of their vehicles on the passenger side don't want to step in to a pool of water. So they park more closely to the face of the curb. And in doing so, they will restrict the flow or cause ice dams in the winter. But if you try to step out of a vehicle into a pool of water, it's not the safest thing to do, as opposed to stepping on top of the curb or onto the sidewalk, which is why most people tend to park closer to the sidewalk and the top of the curb. As far as one-way streets go, the problem that we seem to have with ideas like that tend to revolve around the idea of change. And where we get accustomed to two-way traffic on any particular street or roadway, it's a lot like roundabouts.
Mhm.
People are up in arms about the prospect of change and how that will affect them until they've lived with the result for a period of time. And they get used to it. They accommodate themselves to learning something new. And I would propose that one-way streets in this fashion would be an idea that would be worth consideration as a factor of creating something different for traffic flow on these particular residential streets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment on this topic? Okay, well, I'll open it up to final discussion by commissioners on this. Anybody? Donald?
So I'm inclined to go with the staff recommendations as written. In other words, since the preference of the developer is not to have a one-way system, and that can be changed over time down the road, but to limit parking to one side of the street. I think that makes sense to me. I just think I hesitated to make the same comment you made about the gigantic and growing size of American vehicles. But that's what I see, and I would anticipate there may be problems with large vehicles being parked, causing a problem. Given that there's a saving to the city in going with thicker pavement, I think that's a good idea, and I support that. So basically, I support all 4 of the recommendations that are made by staff, and I'm willing to propose approval of that.
Are there any other comments from commissioners? Seeing none, is there a motion on the floor?
So I move to recommend approval to the city council, the Grandview Heights and Grandview Heights Estates final planned unit development amended based on findings of fact and conclusions of law and subject to the following conditions. Do I need to read the 4 conditions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yes.
You don't.
You don't need to do the
Okay.
4? Okay, just so.
Because when you get to your preliminary plat. When you get to the preliminary plat, there's way more and I don't want you to read them all. That's why we say and subject to staff's recommended
Yeah,
conditions,
okay.
yeah.
Subject to staff recommended condition.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Second from Jonna. Any final discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the motion, please.
Evans,
Yes.
Matamore is absent. Heisler White.
Aye.
O'Toole,
Aye.
Priscillic,
Aye.
Schneider is absent, and Moody.
Aye.
That is 5 yeses, 0 no, and 2 absent.
Okay, motion passes. Next item is the PP 24-01 Grandview Heights Estates preliminary plat. Derek.
Chair, Commission, this is the second part of the previous item that we had discussion on. Just in an effort to a brevity. I'm not going to go through in full detail, just like all the things that I just said, but I think what's important, I think, in terms of the preliminary plat is that the preliminary plat is a standard preliminary plat. This is the part of the process that establishes preliminary, the lot layout for the area that we just talked about for the PUD. Remember, the PUD kind of sets the stage and allows now for this preliminary plat that's before you to be now proposed under the current lot configuration, roadway widths and such. With all projects like this, we do, and I think for the edification of our newer members is, when we receive projects from applicants, they include their drainage reports, their stormwater reports, their design information for water and sewer, traffic impact analysis is done as well. And all those things are reviewed internally, not only within city staff, but even externally to groups such as like the school district and YDOT if they need to have input on it and things like that. And so through the process, we do go through that review. The project before you, the preliminary plat specifically, in that review, often at the preliminary stage, we do have conditions, and you'll see in the report a series of conditions, pretty standard conditions for most projects, lots of cleanup things that we kind of call them, final tweaks that will be made with each final plat when they come in. Just as a reminder, this is part of that Grandview Heights, broader Grandview Heights project that started in 2006. This preliminary plat is being done to show the new configuration of lots, the 56 lots that are down there south of Bill Nye Avenue, as well as the 2 proposed multifamily lots right there adjacent to Bill Nye Avenue. You'll see within the subdivisions, the same street layout. And so I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time there. With preliminary plats, similar to the PUD process that I went through, we do look at that kind of conformance with long-range planning studies and other projects. You'll see that this preliminary plat, similar to the PUD that I just went through, matches and meets those requirements. With preliminary plats as well, we do kind of look at a lot of the same things that I did talk about. We did, I think, talk a little bit about stormwater management and drainage earlier. I did mention during the PUD section that they are required to dedicate parkland through the planning or through the preliminary plat process, especially for our newer members. At each final plat is when we'll do that final calculation, and that value will be assessed That amount of money is actually required to be provided prior to going to city council. So we have that in hand before it can be considered by the city council. And that'll be at each final plat. So if they only final plat 10 lots or 20 lots in the first phase, we assess that amount per that requirement. Because it was mentioned just earlier, we do require traffic impact studies to be done with subdivisions. Subdivisions do require that a traffic engineer prepare that. They did look at Bill Nye Avenue. The applicant is correct. Bill Nye Avenue is designed to actually carry a lot of traffic. And actually, this is kind of how that hierarchy is supposed to work. You see these local streets put traffic onto these larger streets. If you think about kind of that road network in that area, if you go to the east, you're going to eventually get into Vista Drive, which, you know, as it goes north towards Grand Avenue, your next major street, you have a large traffic signal. Same thing on Boulder Drive, traffic signals located there, allowing for that future flow. And eventually, over time, as we construct Bill Nye Avenue to the west, that, you know, similar analysis will be looked at in the future as we see other development occur along Bill Nye Avenue. So similar to the past conversation that we had, you'll see the conditions in here about the parking as well as the roadway width or the road standard, design standard. You know, those still remain staff's position in association with the preliminary plat. Finally, one thing that I'll note is with preliminary plats, you do have a series of many more additional items that we look at in terms of approval. What I'm going to do is just kind of note, you know, as I mentioned in the last process, you know, the preliminary plat lot size and things does meet the requirements of our code, not only for the R3 zoning district, but also per the PUD that was just considered. The plat under the proposal and specifically the conditions, if they are upheld, would meet those standards for design for the subdivision. So that includes water, sewer, stormwater, as well as those asphalt widths that we talked about, the roadway width for parking and things like that. As a reminder, this is in the city, so it's on city water and city sewer. So it's meeting all those typical requirements that you would see not only in a subdivision here, but anywhere else in town. You'll then see item number 4 and just kind of your requirements for preliminary plats. And there's a large series of things in here that are generalities of being like consistent with plans, which it is, being compliant with our development standards, meeting local, state, and federal regulations, which it is. We note in this stage any type of intergovernmental agreements. So if like for some reason the county or some federal government was involved. Minimization of like environmental impacts on surrounding properties, utility services. That is one thing that I didn't mention during the preliminary or the PUD process, but I'll mention now is as part of our review, we do mail out information to all of our local utilities. So that'd be like electric, gas, cable. We call those we group those into what we call franchise utilities. We ensure that these subdivisions can be served by those franchise utilities in order to be able to be operational. Now, there are places in Laramie that definitely cannot receive gas, but it's not an essential service. We definitely, though, need cable, which is something that's required as part of our approval process and can be provided in this case. We do also have our police and fire department look at these things to ensure that they can provide proper emergency services, you know, that we have the proper fire hydrant spacing and things like that. That's found in our design drawings. We typically don't include the design drawings or many pages often, but they are reviewed by our city staff, depending upon their professional expertise, whether they're the engineering division or our fire or police department. As with all projects, similar to the PUD process, we do mailed notice. We do post the property with a sign and we do publish notice in Laramie Boomerang. Like I mentioned in the previous report, we did receive one comment, just wanted to know more about the project, which we provided that information and they didn't have any concern with the project. Finally, I'll just note, you'll see in staff's recommendation, a series of conditions. Honestly, many of these are very standard conditions you're going to see in almost every single preliminary plat. As I noted, probably the main two that we've already talked about was the street width and the parking. Aside from that, I would be happy to take any questions. As you know, the city engineering staff is still available and the applicant is also here. And so I would leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if engineering wants to come and say something they haven't said already.
Honorable Mayor, or Honorable Chair, members of the commission, just wanted to, I guess I don't have any other real comments to it. We are still working out some final details on the utilities to it, but those are definitely within reach for the final plat. So I think all other aspects of the plat are looking good on our end.
Okay, thank you. And the applicant?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'll keep this brief. I think we covered a lot of the topics and the previous go around. A little bit more insight on our thinking process behind the design for Grandview Heights Estates. It was a 2-year-long process. We experimented with many different ideas, layouts, street concepts. In the end, after everything came together, it was most beneficial to keep the existing street network in place, again, other than that 15-foot shift of Sitting Bull Trail to the south to account for the multifamily component. A lot of our thinking behind this, again, came out of the 2020 Laramie Housing Study. Again, trying to do what we can to contribute to solving more of the affordable housing issue. We feel that the universal design with the 56 lots being able to accommodate a cottage, a townhome, or a twin home with the addition of the apartments, that's a pretty good attempt at covering a spectrum that would be considered more on the affordable side of things. So we're proud to offer this, and I'm available to answer any questions.
And I thank you very much for this project. I think it's needed and it's well thought out and designed, and I appreciate your stepping up and doing this work.
You bet.
Commissioners, any questions for staff and the applicant?
I'd just like to echo that. I really appreciate you guys trying to come up with affordable housing at a time when affordable housing is really needed in Laramie.
You bet. We hope to continue that. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Are there any folks in public that want to step up to the podium and talk about this topic? Seeing none. So if there's no further discussion amongst commissioners, which I don't think there is there a motion on the floor?
I move to recommend that the city council approve the Grandview Heights Estates preliminary plat based on findings of fact and conclusions of law and subject to the staff's recommended conditions. And because Derek doesn't want me to read them, I think I'll go ahead and read them all. Just so the
No, you're
long
not.
suffering folks from the west side
We
have
appreciate
to
that.
endure more than 2 hours of listening to this stuff.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Just a second from Sylvie. Thank you. Any further discussion? One last time, seeing none, a roll call vote, please.
Evans,
Yes.
Madmore is absent. Heisler White. O'Toole,
Yes.
Priscillic,
yes.
Schneider is absent. Moody,
Yes.
that is 5 yeses, 0 no, and 2 absent.
So it passes. Okay, on to the next topic, which is CUP 24 02 car wash, conditional use permit. Philip. Please.
Good evening. Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Before you have a conditional use permit with the applicant, Breeze Through Car Wash located. They're wanting to locate at 2606 Grand Avenue. It's an interesting lot. It's split zoned. Property is, the northern parcel is B2 along Grand Avenue, which is our general commercial or general business district, and then the southern parcel is B1, which is less intensive, limited business. So in proposing a car wash at this site, the applicant was required to go through the conditional use permit to make sure that the conditions and the site itself are okay to be placed in that neighborhood, compatible and so forth. So I'll go through the staff report here, and we also have the applicant and a representative from breeze through here to give, I believe they will be giving a brief overview of the car wash and the site as well. As mentioned, the zoning is split zoned on the site, B1, B2. North of the site, you have B2. South of the site, you do have multifamily residential. There's an apartment building, multifamily apartment building there at the moment. East and west also follow the split zone pattern of the site. In reviewing the site design, we did find that the ingress and egress of the property is sufficient as described, although we are in the site plan process, which would follow this conditional use approval. If that were to happen this evening, we would ask the applicant to address some questions that we had internally about the traffic impact analysis that was provided, specifically for that intersection of Garfield and 26th Street. But the applicant has agreed to explore options there and making that intersection work better with the proposed car wash there. Off-street parking, loading areas on this site. Given that it's a car wash, not a whole lot of parking, on-site parking other than for the vehicles that are actually being washed and vacuumed is needed there. So there are going to be some on-street parking spots that are going to be provided in the site plan to accommodate any employee or employees rather, or visitors to the site. We don't anticipate any off-site impacts. There was questions about the vacuum noise specifically because this is something with car washes near a residential area that could come into play. But we are assured by the applicant that the vacuums being used meet acceptable limits. So I'll let them speak to that more perhaps during their presentation. Refuse service areas, nothing there. Adequate trash collection and is provided on site. City water and sewer can be provided. The drainage plan has also been preliminarily reviewed by city staff, but I want to let you all know again, repeat the fact that a site plan process will also need to occur for this following this conditional use. So with that, I mean, we feel like the site is adequate for a car wash. It is split zone. That's the only reason. It's along Grand Avenue. I mean, a major commercial corridor in town. We feel like it meets the required review and analysis. So we are recommending approval with the conditions attached in the staff report, and these are all common conditions other than common conditions for a conditional use permit approval. Other than that additional number 8, the condition that will be asking the applicant for additional information in the traffic impact analysis phase of the site plan review. We did post this property and let surrounding property owners within 300 feet of the site know about this conditional use permit. We also we mailed those, and we also advertise in the paper and put signs up on the site, which are all normal procedures for a conditional use permit. Actually, we have received no questions or inquiries about the site to date. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you and just let you know, again, the applicant is here as well.
Does the applicant have anything that they want to say?
I believe they do have a presentation.
Okay. Come step on up. Thank you.
Want us to do the presentation first?
Sure. Well, then we'll just ask questions after the.
Good evening, I'm Deanne Frederickson, formerly of Baseline Engineering, but as of today, I'm D Rune Consulting LLC. Continuing to work with John Agnew here, I'm the president of Breeze Through Car Wash. John and I have been working together on car washes in Wyoming and northern Colorado for 20 years now. And so we're very excited about this new site in Laramie. And so we'd like to just give you a little bit of information about what we planned here. And then we'll be open to conversation or questions. So the picture that you're seeing there is our newest, we just opened a car wash in Windsor, and that just opened on Easter Sunday. And we're excited about that new installation as well. So you're seeing all of our existing car washes in this slide program. Next slide. Breeze Through Car Wash is a family-owned, employee-owned small business. It's based in Fort Collins, Colorado. There are currently 15 car washes located in northern Colorado and Wyoming. We have 3 sites in Cheyenne, and this will be our first in Laramie. One of our car wash sites in Cheyenne, we will be developing a 64 unit apartment complex for employee housing, for workforce housing. And so we're pleased to come into the town of Laramie as well. The location is a 1.1 acres in size. It's situated south of Grand Avenue and east of 26th Street. The land use for the site is a fuel station now abandoned, and we know there's abandoned fuel tanks underground, which we'll be removing. And it has all of the environmental clearances that we needed for that. Again, it's zone B1 and B2. We need to get a conditional use for the B1 zoning portion of the project. It's bordered on 3 sides by commercial properties and with single family and multifamily residential on the south side of Garfield. Site plan, next slide. The site plan, we're featuring a 4,600 square foot tunnel wash building. There will be 2 pay stations. There'll be 19 free vacuum stations. We appreciate this site because there's lots of room for vacuums, and that keeps the cars going, keeps the cars moving through the site. There will be 5 to 6 employees who will operate the site at all times. Well, there'll be a total of 15, up to 15 new employees for this project. The hours of operation are generally during daylight hours, and it's manned at all times. It's never operated without someone there operating. And we can get 60 cars per hour during peak hours, 60 to 100 cars. It takes about 3 minutes to get through a car wash cycle. People, I don't know if you're familiar with the tunnel wash concept, but people stay in their cars. And then their cars are ushered onto a conveyor system, and it takes 3 minutes to get through the wash cycle and the dry cycle. Building elevations are typical of all of our car wash sites. It'll be a pre-engineered metal building with a split face CMU base around the entire exterior. It'll have embossed panels on the upper side, upper portions in light beige. The metal span CFR roof system, sanding steam metal roof The color will be silver. Aluminum storefront windows. Traffic was an interesting challenge for us. But we did a full traffic analysis on this site. We have a traffic engineer, Fred Lance, that did the analysis. He took counts on Grand Avenue and then analyzed the intersections as directed by the city. So 26th is a 2-lane collector. Northbound and southbound movements at Grand and 26 are, we're gonna say at level of service E and F now, and they'll continue to be a poor level of service. But I think for the car wash, we put the access drive on the south closer to Garfield. And so cars will really be coming and going that direction onto Garfield. No improvements are recommended at this time by our traffic engineer, except for the new access and sidewalks to accommodate the traffic generated by the proposed car wash development. And so I put the level of service diagram on there for your information if you wanted to see it. We have explored the long-term impacts of Garfield and 26 as part of the condition of approval. We can do a new analysis, but our analysis is showing that putting a 4-way stop there might just bring that up to a level of service B by 2046, which is when the traffic level of service goes down to an E. So we don't feel like that would be a big thing for us. Other than that, I have I'm open for questions, conversation. John's here too. He's excited about meeting you and being a part of your community.
All right, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any questions from commissioners for staff and applicant? John?
Yeah, could you tell us about what type of a wash system you're using? Is this the German wash or what?
Most of the equipment is made in the US. There's a small amount of equipment that's made in Canada, but it's not really there's not really a American or German or any, it's mostly US built equipment that's assembled and put together for the wash process.
And the cars actually drive through the wash,
You
right?
stay in your car and there's a conveyor that has a roller that comes up behind your rear tire and pushes you through the car wash. So it's automated. You stay in your car and it goes through the wash process.
And that's why it's manned. We have people that are helping people navigate the conveyor system, and you put your car in neutral and you proceed forward, and it's really a pretty comfortable ride through the car wash.
It's recreational too.
Yeah.
So is the water recycled?
It has a water reclaim system. About 2/3 of the wash process uses reclaimed water.
I see. And that which goes to waste, does it go into the sewer system or the storm drains?
The sewer system.
Okay, and so the wastewater treatment guys are hip to, whatever chemicals are used that it's all not gonna kill our sewage biome.
Like I said, we have 15 sites and they've all been very compliant to the local municipalities and the local municipal needs. I don't expect this to be any different. We'll still do an analysis for the site development plan. And
Great.
does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for everyone? Donald?
So the water that ends up going to the water treatment plant, that contains detergent, does it contain anything else?
The wash, the chemicals in the wash process, the detergents, some wax that goes on the car, and any road, anything that comes off the car, the whatever would come off the dirt of the car, but that's all of it.
Okay.
And then there's a series of sand oil interceptors that the solids fall out of and the oils stay on the top. So it's
Okay, thank you.
John?
Is this a cold water or hot water system?
We have the ability to use hot water when it's below freezing for some of the applications. So either cold or heated water, we have to use the hot water in the winter to keep it from freezing.
Is this a brushless system?
It has friction material that cleans the cars.
What do you mean by friction?
It's made out of it's made out like a Nerf football that foam. It's you can call it brushes, but it's just a brush type spinning foam material.
But it's not touchless.
No, it's not
basically.
touchless.
Okay.
This is not really a planning commission question, but I'll ask it anyway. We seem to have a lot of car wash businesses moving into town. So have you guys looked at that to see if you guys, because this is going to be a big investment, that it's, you can compete and stay in business?
So you see lots of car washes coming into town. There's the one in the north end of Laramie. That's a self-service car wash and really they have different clients. You probably have a lot of restaurants in town too. You have your fast food, your quick service, and your full service restaurant. So they're different type of customers for different needs, but it's like anything. There's different types of retail stores, different types of.
So you don't think the market is saturated?
If I did, I wouldn't be.
Okay.
I wouldn't be
Sure,
investing.
that's occurred to
I
you.
wouldn't be investing $7 million if I didn't think it was
Amen.
viable.
Yeah.
And we've looked at Laramie for
A long
a number of
time.
years. I don't know how
Yeah.
many years ago we looked at Laramie.
Some of our other sites, though, not so much here, although you would know better than I do, but especially in Fort Collins and Loveland, water is very scarce. And so car washes are a big deal
Right.
because it's really water wise. You save a lot more water.
We got lots of water.
Yeah, you have lots of water, but that's one of the reasons why they're so popular now and getting more and more popular all the time.
This actually was, I looked at Laramie years ago, the old Long John Silver's, it became a Starbucks. We looked at that location before the Starbucks did it and we passed on it. And really this was driven by customers telling they wanted Laramie. People go to Cheyenne and use our facility, in Fort Collins and use our facilities.
Right on. Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? We got John?
Somebody alluded to the fact that you were gonna address something related to noise and vacuums.
Oh.
Just wanted to hear a little more
So
about
the
that.
vacuums uses a central producer. So it has a one large motor and the vacuum producer. And then the individual hoses, if you think of a vacuum cleaner at home, the hose doesn't really make the air going in doesn't make much noise. It's the motor. So this motor is designed with a big muffler on it. So has a silencer on it and it's below whatever the decibel, whatever the neighborhood decibel requirements are. So it's really not that noisy. People think the vacuums are noisy, but really the noise.
The first one we did, we were worried, and so we did all these noise tests and all these,
Yeah.
remember, but we have 15 locations now that are tried and tested, tried and true. And it's not been a complaint that we know of by the neighboring properties, but it
Yeah.
definitely meets the level of service in terms of noise level.
Do you have any others in residential areas?
Yep.
Yep.
We have the one in Windsor. If you
On the screen.
very first,
We believe you. We saw
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that was in a residential area.
Yes,
yeah, it's very close to.
it's very similar. It's on
It's-
Main Street, but then there's
We have
residences.
a vacuum lot across the street from the car wash. It's just vacuums. And one side is a Super 8 motel and the other side is residential. So
Any other questions from commission? Is there, okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Public comment, anyone out there that wants to comment on this conditional use permit app proposal? Seeing none? One last chance for commission members to say anything? Seeing none, is there a motion on the floor?
I move to approve the conditional use permit for the establishment of a car wash on property zoned B1 Limited Business District located at 2606 Grand Avenue, based on findings of fact and conclusions of law and subject to all staff's recommended conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
John, second. Final comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Evans,
Yes.
Matamore, absent. Heisler White. O'Toole,
Yes.
Priscillic,
Yes.
Schneider, absent. Moody.
Yes,
There's 5 yeses, 0 no, and 2 absent.
okay. Thank you very much for the car wash and best of luck. All right, next item of business is a work session on the West Side Vision Plan presentation. So this is Philip, this is just a work session. We're here to listen to what happened. There's no decisions to be made
Yes.
by this body.
Correct, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, and we do have our 2 student interns, our 2 master student interns online. And they are going to provide a presentation on the findings of this extensive public input effort. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to, or let you turn it over to Aslan.
Okay, Aslan, take it away. Thank you very much.
Hi, y'all. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to turn it over to Avery then to get our presentation started. And thanks everyone for sticking around with us.
Thanks for hanging in there.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us again. We were excited to share the results of this study. To get right into it, just an overview of what we were doing. The study was first initiated by the city council and the planning staff. And Aslan and I worked very closely with planning staff to get all this put together. And really the aim of the study was just to engage with the West Side in this process that we kind of created ourselves, to hear what they wanted to build on in their community, what they loved, what they thought could be improved, and sort of build on those strengths that we saw there and that they perceived themselves. To show you where we were looking at specifically, here is a map of our study area. We focused on the West Side, all the way up to 80 and down to along the Laramie River there. But the shaded pink is where was the engagement area, our focus study area, where everyone on the West Side lives. Near downtown, you can see the footbridge there as well. This was a 4-month process in which we tried to engage in a multifaceted way in both online and in-person engagement. With public meetings, we tried doing pop-ups, interviews, surveys, a community hotline that saw some success in the early stages of this engagement study. But just taking you through how we listened here really quickly. We started early February. We met with planning staff, got our survey onto the city website, and then we initiated the hotline. Then we immediately had our first in-person meeting to get the voices of the West Side residents and figure out, kind of take their temperature and figure out what they were looking at and how they would react to us and the project itself. And I gotta say, it was an amazing reaction, and we got a ton of engagement from those folks, and they were all really, really helpful. And then after we did our initial in-person meeting, we switched to stakeholder interviews through the last couple weeks of February and then through all of March, to kind of get specific voices from long-term residents and people that have invested in the community and things of that nature, while still maintaining the online survey and the community hotline throughout, and taking those questions and those comments as they came. We also did report backs, and there are 3 of them there. We did a report back after every in-person meeting, and then the final one was our executive summary at the end of the process. And that was just to sort of hold ourselves accountable and make sure that there was transparency between ourselves and the people that we were engaging with, that what they were saying to us was being heard, and we were directly implementing what they said into what we were creating. So those were just sort of check-ins with not only the Laramie planning staff, but also with the community. And Aslan will kind of dive into some of the more specifics of how we engaged and what sort of we heard and saw throughout. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Avery. So yeah, before I get into exactly what we heard from residents, I just wanted to give y'all an overview of who exactly we talked to. And so in those two vision sessions, we had about 100+ attendees, and some of those were duplicates, right? But we did notice at each session that we had unique participants at each that we hadn't seen before. We did 10 overall stakeholder and resident interviews. And then for our online survey, which we had 2 versions, we had 69 total responses. And the survey was one way that we took demographic data. And so from that, we found out that about 66.67%, or about 2/3 of that survey respondents, were West Side residents. And that is something that really matched up with what we were seeing at the vision sessions. And was kind of one of our goals from the get, was to make sure that we were really engaging with and hearing from residents. So first, starting with what West Side residents love about their neighborhood, we heard they love the sense of community that they have there, the quiet and isolation, the location and access to amenities, with many people talking about the footbridge or the green belt along the Laramie River. And then the history was something that came up a lot, with many folks giving us kind of an introduction to the neighborhood through stories about immigrant families and how the homes were built there. And then lastly, something we talked about a lot was the character. Everyone really loved the character. And so we wanted to kind of give a list of some words that we heard people describe their neighborhood as. These are not, not everyone agrees with these words, but we just wanted a comprehensive list. But we heard quirky, unique, eclectic, blue collar, weird, artistic, down to earth, and real. And all of these were said very lovingly about the West Side. So next I want to talk about what they wanted to see improved and protected. And so the main things here are neighborhood beautification, safety and street infrastructure, and access to green spaces. And these are things that they felt were already there, right, but could use some improvement. For neighborhood beautification, one thing that was brought up quite a bit was the cleaning up of the Union Pacific property along the border of the neighborhood. As well as maybe some code enforcement for junked vehicles and things like that. We also heard some things about flooding and safety infrastructure in the neighborhood. There's some segments that don't have any stop signs, which has led to some speeding. And then they really were proud of their access to green spaces currently, but we're also looking to explore opportunities for more, as well as implementing measures to make sure that they have safe access to those. As far as things they wanted to protect, as I mentioned, something they love is the connectivity, and they wanted to see that kind of grown upon in food access, and as well as protecting connectivity they have now with better sidewalks and connections. They wanted to protect their neighborhood history through education, public art and signage, and protecting their historic homes. And then something that came up quite a bit was the protection of small scale and unique homes. And some ideas that came up around this were design concepts, zoning protections, and protecting against tear downs. So in our second phase of this process, which Avery kind of spoke on, we did move on to thinking about different scenarios and wanting to see what West Side residents would think of them, if there was any that they would prefer. And so we presented 5 scenarios, which were 1, preserving historic homes and design, 2, preserving small scale housing, 3, exploring R1 single family zoning, 4, compatible housing designs, and 5, stricter code enforcement. And these were all things that we developed from feedback we had heard in the first part of engagement, and then used to kind of figure out what people were interested in. So for the first one, which is the preserving historic homes and designs, we presented folks with just a basic historic preservation ordinance and explained how that may or may not allow them to do different things with their homes. And so we have 2 kind of just scales here, and these were presented during this in-person event, and so we had people point to these. And so as you can see, the insight was kind of split on whether or not people were interested in and liked the idea of a historic preservation ordinance being enacted. And so kind of our key insight from this event and from this scenario was that there is a strong interest in preserving older homes and in the eclectic design, but residents do seem to be slightly wary and torn on the right way to do that. Some are very aware of the consequences of historic preservation ordinances, and those are likely the people that put a negative reaction, and then others were very interested in the historic preservation ordinance for its ability to protect existing historic homes. So our next scenario was preserving small-scale housing. Generally, the reaction to this ordinance that we presented, which was one that would regulate heights and footprint to be smaller than the current zoning ordinance allows, was pretty positive. And we got the overall sense that the current zoning regulations are insufficient to preserve the character of the West Side neighborhood, and that is how residents feel. And they're very interested in safeguarding what is there in the small scale housing, and that they're also interested in implementing measures to do so and to reduce the height of homes, but they still would like to see the fostering of diversity in architecture and affordability that they have now as well. Third, we have exploring R1 zoning. Overall, the reaction to rezoning the whole neighborhood as R1 was fairly negative. It was over on the left side of the scale. And the primary concern behind this was that it didn't go quite far enough in protecting small scale housing. R1 zoning does still allow 40 feet tall, 30-foot wide lot, 2 stories. And many of the residents indicated that maintaining the established aesthetic and scale took precedent over accommodating larger, taller new residences, even if they were single family. Fourth, we have compatible housing designs. So we presented them these images and asked them to pick which they liked or didn't like. They were just meant to serve as examples and to get ideas of design choices. And so the top row, we have single family style homes. The residents largely liked option C. For the second row, we have duplexes represented, and residents largely liked option B. And then the third row, we have some multifamily represented, and residents largely liked option B here as well. And so things that we noticed from this and that we talked about were that recessed garages or no visible garage from the front were preferred. Matching the general style of the neighborhood was preferred. And then a single story or an unassuming 2 stories where it's not a full stack was something that people liked. And finally, we have a scenario on stricter code enforcement. So this was essentially just letting folks know what if code enforcement came into the neighborhood a bit more often and, gave citations for things that were violating code. And overall, for issues like overgrowth, home repairs, things like that, the neighborhood felt pretty neutral to negative on this. Many indicated a sentiment that people should be good neighbors and assist in cleaning up or with repairs if homeowners are unable to do so. There was more interest in the city providing more code enforcement around junked cars in the neighborhood. That received a bit more of a positive reaction. But overall, there was kind of a split sentiment on more strict code enforcement in the West Side. And so just to give an overview of what we learned, and then Avery will finish us out with the recommendations that we have, is just that we learned that the West Side is a really unique and special place to live for many reasons. The people, the green spaces, the location, the history, the homes, these all came up a lot for us when we were really getting to spend time with folks. But we did overwhelmingly hear that the small eclectic homes are one of the most important and distinguishing features of the West Side. And I know there was talk earlier today about the Laramie housing study, and that was also something that was identified in that, was that this kind of small scale affordable housing is something that's really important to the city. And so we also heard that, neighbors are open to and desire some kind of government intervention like zoning to protect this element of their neighborhood. And now I'll turn it over to Avery to finish this out.
Thank you, Aslan. We came up with 4 recommendations based on everything that we've heard. We also asked those who took the survey, which were, as Aslan had said before, largely West Side residents themselves, to sort of rank them in terms of ideal next steps and how they would like to see things proceed here in the future now that this study has come to an end. The first recommendation was the overlay district. Instead of This sort of evolved from rezoning from R2 to R1 to creating an overlay district that more accurately represented the scale that the people of the West Side are kind of looking for. And we got a lot of these numbers from the residents in that second scenario-based activity. 25-foot height maximums, 2,000 square feet footprints, and then with the option to increase the existing footprint by 20% every 5 years. So that way you still are able to do things with your property, but maybe, you know, not buying a home and then buying another lot and then doubling it up. The residents worked really closely with Laramie, they could work closely with Laramie staff to identify more specifics about these components to go into this ordinance to make it something that could be really effective in this community. And then this one tied for second with the second recommendation, which was a design guidebook. The second recommendation of a design guidebook was kind of created based on that scenario where we had people multiple choice pick homes. We think it would be very beneficial to have some sort of guide to sort of show potential developers or investors in the community what the residents of Laramie are looking to see when they look outside and see their neighbor's home or things like that. So creating a photo book of the West Side, doing a walking tour, and so with some resident supported design committee that creates this design book. So that way, when a project does come into the West Side, it doesn't meet an immediate wall of, well, what's it going to look like? How big is it going to be? You know, you kind of have an idea of what they're getting into before they decide to move forward with the process. And some things that we heard in the next two recommendations were things that we heard right away when we first did our engagement in our first survey, was controlling speed and making the neighborhood more safer, because the one thing that the residents of the West Side really love is that it's a family-friendly community where they can see kids playing out in their front yards, and people can go to the community center and use that, and they can walk around without having to worry about anything. So maintaining safe streets was a very important thing for them. So working with residents to identify primary locations where they have been seeing people run stop signs, speed excessively, maybe not look both ways before making turns and all that kind of stuff, working with people that are living right there to find those locations. And then the fourth one was based on what residents have been considering an uptick in flooding activity. We had heard that flooding in this area has been fairly common, but it's been sort of ramping up as of late. So trying to figuring out why that is with a flooding in the West Side report that can be created with residents and then City of Laramie staff to really identify those spots and why it floods, what they can do to maybe mitigate some of that stuff to prevent property damage and prevent damage and flooding to people's homes. Thank you guys for listening to us. If you, there's an executive summary and the full report out on the city website still. And there's a QR code to visit that homepage. And Aslan and I are happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
All right. Well, Aslan and Avery, I just want to say that, like the executive summary, it was so easy to figure out what you guys did and what you found and the recommendations. I think the presentation was just spot on, understandable and easy to make sense out of what you did. And I think you did a bang up job. I really am very, very impressed with, and then the city is, I think, hit gold to get a study like this that's readable and understandable and very, very pointed. You guys have a great future in planning, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I guess having said that, in a work session, Derek and Philip, how do you want to sort of go through the discussion and for a work session?
Mr. Chair, before we get to that, I was wanting to address a few questions that we did have from other planning commissioners that we did get, specifically about the pre-approved building sets that could accommodate and streamline the process for buildings that, perhaps meet the standards that are being recommended here. At this point in time, the city goes through the IBC, the International Building Code, just like most places that have building inspectors and do permitting and so forth, which the city of Laramie does. There's no pre-approved house plans through IBC proper. So that'd be something that the city would need to implement, and we would need to internally review pre-approved plans and make that a priority. That could come out of this process, but as current, we haven't. We've talked about it. We've explored it. We've definitely looked at other communities that are doing it. It's usually bigger communities, larger cities that do this to streamline the process, but it's definitely something that's on our radar and I think could help this. But as far as running the work session, usually there is a period for public comment and then discussion amongst the commissioners. But as you mentioned, there's no approval for this plan. This is something that we're going to use when approached by developers, when approached by city council on initiatives that we're taking and educating them on what we heard, really. So we are planning to take the same presentation to city council at a July 9th work session. And then they will ultimately endorse the plan, I think is what they're planning to do.
Which means what?
To acknowledge the process, to acknowledge the planning process, to acknowledge the public input that was received, the process that it went through. Yeah.
But how their recommendations are integrated into planning and zoning and city processes, you know, to be hashed out by council and you folks.
Certainly. I mean, when we go through our comprehensive planning effort in the next year, we're going to be taking plans like these into account when we do work with the consultant through the comprehensive planning effort. And what comes out of that, I mean, recommendations from this plan will most likely be included in a comprehensive plan. But again, it's a guiding document, right? I mean, it's not a regulatory one. It's got recommendations that certainly could turn into council goals, could turn into council objectives. I would say I would also encourage the public that is listening and present tonight and that listen to this recording later to also take these recommendations to heart and you know, when there is a recommendation that's supported through this planning effort that says perhaps an overlay district or something to that nature should be implemented, then I think it needs to come from a community group or a citizen. That application process needs to start somewhere. Us as staff, we wouldn't start that process unless instigated or told to by city council. Instructed to.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this process is that the west side is a very well-defined geographical piece of real estate, you know, and by the Laramie River and the railroad and the history, and you know, it's a nice tidy little place, which you know, from a planning perspective of how you change the comprehensive plan based on something like this, you know, other parts of the city may consider themselves, you know, distinct communities as well. Maybe not as tidy as West Side is, like say maybe the tree area says we want special covenants or West Laramie or North, you know, you start, you know, carving up bits of the city to create sort of special enclaves of desires in this kind of a process of hearing what people want and what's worth, you know, fighting for. I mean, it gets complicated all of a sudden when you apply it to a citywide. I don't know. I mean, any thoughts about how this process really could be used to plan other areas of the city for incorporation into a comprehensive plan without turning it into a bunch of little sub covenants.
No, I think, I think there are very distinctive neighborhoods in Laramie that could benefit from a public process like this. Essentially a neighborhood plan with recommendations coming from the people themselves that live there as to what they want to see there and what they want the future of the neighborhood to hold. So I think this could initiate other neighborhood plans perhaps. You know, just to capture things like neighborhood character and community buy-in more.
Yeah, Derek?
Yeah, and I think I'd add just that, I mean, this is just, it's a pretty common model used in the planning field, to get into a neighborhood like this and try to hear the voices of the neighborhood for whatever reason. Sometimes it's a neighborhood character issue, sometimes it might be an environmental concern or a actual project concern, like a highway is about to go through your neighborhood or something. And I mean, so I think like Philip said, I mean, I think using this as a model in other neighborhoods is something that I think we'll probably be looking at, and worked well here. And we think we got a lot of really good information and good input. And this is just the first step. And, tonight just being here's what we heard, right? Like not necessarily needing anything from the commission, but just wanting you to know as a commission that this is where we got to. We have it up online. And I think like Philip said, it's going to be, these different council directives or maybe, citizen driven, or maybe it's some sort of project that drives change within the neighborhood, right? And that's always what this is really helpful for us is, having to hear what everyone had to say. So it provides us some broader context than maybe the two voices we hear for whatever reason because they were the loudest or they showed up to the meeting or whatever. I mean, you see it every day when you come to a planning commission meeting. You may only hear from whoever decides to attend the meeting, right? And it's no different that when we try to engage a neighborhood like this to just try to get good input. So I think there's a lot more to come, based upon these recommendations and maybe future goals of the council or like Philip said, citizen driven. So.
Okay. Yeah, Donald?
So I think this is a very good report. And I congratulate the two folks who pulled this together. And I realize that this is just the start of a process. I noticed the cunningness with which it's titled The West Side Vision. Aisling probably knows this, but Aisling is the Irish word for vision. So she's actually put her name into the title.
Whoa.
But anyway, I guess I have several questions and comments. One is the West Side neighborhood. I used to drive through that every day going to work. And that neighborhood has changed a lot. And at the moment, it is at high risk of undergoing gentrification, big time, because it's so close to the downtown. And it has lots and lots of open lots, big open lots that at the moment, the way the city planning rules go, could mean that a lot of housing could go into that area, and we need housing, but at the same time, it'll be counter to the style of housing that's currently in the neighborhood. I guess I have a question for the planning folks, and that is, if one of the goals here is to keep the character of this neighborhood, is it even possible to implement some of these suggestions? Is it possible to resist gentrification? What's the experience of other communities that have a blue collar neighborhood like this that is being increasingly, at least from what I see, being recognized as an area that can be exploited for development, regardless of what the neighbors want?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and through you, I would say there's different layers of the onion when it comes to gentrification. And one of the biggest, I think you would see is different types of development occurring where before there was perhaps as it is now, single family, right? They're very small comparatively to the rest of the suburban neighborhoods and even the older neighborhoods that are more in the center of the city, but still single family homes. At current, R2 is present over there, so multifamily projects are happening, as we know. Pine Street, Cedar Street, there's already been there's multifamily going in there. I think one thing that we heard here, and perhaps Aslan and Avery want to expand on it, is that type of housing may not fit everywhere in West Side. So one way to not allow that really, and to prevent that from happening any further than it already is a rezoning or a overlay district that would keep single family. Now, that wouldn't stop somebody from buying a lot, raising it, building another much bigger house there. I mean, there's height requirements that perhaps would address that. But I think at the end of the day, it is an aging neighborhood, right? I mean, like houses aren't being built like that anymore. That's what's so special about over there. And I think what people really like is that it's so unique. So, the fear of losing that eclecticness by instituting some type of overlay is really the reason that it's the number one recommendation in the plan. But really, government can only do so much too. I mean, we can put the rules in place, but there's all types of scenarios that I can just think about right here where a developer could buy a whole block and raise them all and make a multifamily looking project and have them meet the standards of R2 currently. So, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, not knowing what the market holds in Laramie here in the future. But I definitely think the recommendations outlined here are a good first step for what planning staff and ultimately city council can do to address citizen concerns over there.
Do you think enough people were surveyed?
Yeah, so I think Aslan did a good job of showing how many people were involved in the process. And I think I mentioned this before, but generally in a planning survey, getting 10% of people to respond is, as a rule of thumb, very good for this type of unsolicited process, right? Where there's no ultimate decision being made. There's not a rezoning happening. This is strictly public input. Tell us what you think. That's what I mean by unsolicited survey. So 10%, but with the mailings that we sent out, I believe it was about 450 separate owners. We did get over 100 people participating in public events. I'll probably defer to Aslan to give the detailed numbers again, but we far exceed that 10%. And so we were very pleased with the response that we got.
Okay. Any other questions from commission? We'll open it up to public comments. Thank you, everybody, for being patient. Come to the front and state your name, and you got 3 minutes or so to.
My name is Jan Wilson, and I just have a question for Ashlyn and Avery. I would like to hear what you heard about the old historic church on that side, the Scandinavian Lutheran Church that's all boarded up with its parsonage boarded up. I'd like to hear what you heard about that.
Well, from the residents, we heard a lot of interest in rehabbing the building and restoring it to, a beautiful icon in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, and I think someone from the city relayed this to us, that it has, and I think also someone from the neighborhood has tried to reach out to the owners, and they have been fairly unresponsive to any kind of inquiries or anything like that, which is really unfortunate. But I know that there is a lot of interest in that property.
Yeah, I did hear from somebody on the preservation board who was here earlier, but she had to leave to go to our preservation board meeting. That she and some others are thinking of driving to Omaha where the owners live and trying to confront them because of the lack of response. I just want to throw this out here, and I know our history is much, much younger than back east. But recently in Salem, Massachusetts, where the witch panic happened many years ago, there's an old building where some of the ladies were incarcerated. I have an interest in that because my 8th great grandmother was incarcerated and hung. But they actually contacted the owner of that property, and I'm not saying this is possible. I'm just throwing it out there. They contacted the owner and said, you have to bring it up to standards and not let it disintegrate anymore, or sell it to somebody who will bring it up to standards. That's a historic building, and I have my son's great-great-grandparents were some of the first people married in that church, and they came over, one from Denmark and one from Norway. And so I have a strong interest in that church. That's why I was asking. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else out there? Okay. Oh, yeah, gentlemen, come on up and state your name.
I'm a repeat offender.
Okay, fair enough.
Bob Moore, once again, in addition to owning property here in town, I've also been a developer on the west side as recently as 25 years ago. And I'm also a retired remodel contractor. My vested interest in that side of town, as well as aspects of the tree area, is that there's such a variety of architecture. What has happened on the west side with those townhouse developments recently is that they do not fit the architecture of anywhere in this city, except for the new stuff that's already been built. It all looks the same. It's all sterile, inside and out. It does not reflect the character of the people who are in this community. And I understand that people need a roof over their heads. They don't have any choice with the limited options of housing that currently exist in this city. And there is a push, and I understand the push to develop more housing for low income, for medium income, for high income people. There's just that push as the city grows. But I would encourage the Planning Commission to be very careful about their recommendations ongoing, especially for the west side, and the character of development. Some of those houses over there have adequate foundations. Some of them are built on rubble and old railroad ties. Something needs to be done differently with those. Some of them are in conditions where they need to be torn down and another structure rebuilt because they're in such bad shape. But others do not fit that representation. And there's something about the integrity that needs to be kept within neighborhoods like that, that are as distinct as the tree area, that are as distinct as other places, other neighborhoods in this town. The push for adequate housing for people since World War II has been a development of certain styles that get put up quickly, that look alike, and that provide a shelter for people, but they do not reflect any integrity in our imaginations. They're just a box, a structure, a place for people to live. And I would like to see something much different come out of the west side, especially in the development in the future of that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, gang, any more comments on? Oh, you bet. Come on, didn't see you. Sorry.
My name's Evan Eganoff. I live at 610 South Pine Street on the west side. I just want to first say thanks to Aslan and Avery, CU students. They did a really good job. Listening to us, everything. Also want to say thanks. I want to let the commission know how good the planning department did. Derek and Philip and Joe, they took time out of their days and budget to come midday and speak with us many times. And they're really helpful and, showed us our options and gave us some, tough realities at times, but they walked us through a lot of the process. They did a great job. I think the document really showed what the voices on the west side were saying. I think the overlay is probably one of the best things we can look at moving forward. I do agree there are other neighborhoods in town that may take this template and go with it. So, this may be opening up a can of worms, so to say, but anyway, just thanks to everybody. And that was it.
Thank you.
Congrats on it.
Thank you. Hey, so Derek, what would be the next step for the overlay district? What if the community said, we saw this #1 recommendation, and how do we jumpstart an overlay district discussion and process?
Yeah, I can take that question. Anyone can bring forth an application for a rezoning, which this would fall under an overlay district. It has regulatory power. We have a rezoning application that we're glad to walk through with anybody that's interested in that process. Ultimately, it does come before this board again, and then it goes to city council for 3 readings. There are some intricacies with the rezoning as far as how city council ultimately has to vote on it if there's a certain percentage of the public that comes out against a rezoning, right? But all those points we're happy to go over and discuss with a potential applicant. But short answer is there's an application, just like a building permit application, that you can come to our office and get and be on your way, and it's all lined out and the steps are in there.
Donald?
And that should include or not include the 4G site? Or is the 4G site, is the plan for the 4G site, is that already kind of cooked?
Well, I mean, the 4G site would need to be rezoned anyway because it's industrial now. So like with any type of future developer coming in there, unless it's an industrial use, would need to go through the same rezoning process. So it's really no different from a straight rezoning to an overlay district over the existing zone.
So you're basically kicking it back to the west side community, so they need to take the initiative? Is that what you're saying?
It could happen one of 2 ways, right? I mean, city council has instructed the planning department to initiate text amendments before that I've been a part of. Rezonings, we've also initiated as well with the annex properties that I think some of you were in that process, bringing city properties into the city boundary. We've done that. So again, I'll just reiterate the fact that, we have a lot going on, right? And so does city council. But if this does rise to a city councilor's priority list, then yeah, it would be something that staff could initiate.
Thanks, Derek. Did you have, he took your thunder, huh? Okay. All right, well, looks great. I mean, so let's move on and Avery and Ashlyn, I guess we'll bid you adieu, but fantastic job.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Okay, so that's the work session. Is there a motion to adjourn as Laramie Planning Commission and re-adjourn as Board of Adjustment. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, so we are now wearing the hat of the Board of Adjustment. What's before us is a variance, VAR 24-05, 2800 Riverside Drive Public Improvement Requirement. Okay, if there's anybody out there that wants to talk with respect to this variance publicly, I will ask them to, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You just say yes and you're good.
I'm Mark Gunderson and I applied for this variance.
Okay, so you're a yes for the whole truth and, okay, so anyways, we'll let Derek talk or Philip talk about the project. I just wanted to get the legalese done.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as mentioned, the variance requested by the applicant is for an unaddressed property currently, but we named it 2800 Riverside Drive. There isn't a residence there currently, just an outbuilding, essentially a pre-existing non-conforming outbuilding. The applicant is Mark Gunderson. He is asking for a variance from Laramie Municipal Code Section 15660 Q, which requires public improvements for this type of development that the applicant's wishing to do. And the development that he's wishing to do is a minor land division. So essentially that lot is big enough in that zoning district to be split. But in order to split that, public improvements would need to be done on the property. As you may know, on Riverside Drive, however, where this property fronts both Riverside Drive as well as Colorado Avenue, the improvements are in on Colorado Avenue. There's full street section, there's curb, gutter, sidewalk on that end. But on Riverside Drive, it is paved. However, it's not the city standard and there's no curb, gutter, or sidewalk on Riverside Drive. And there's about 75 feet of length there on Riverside Drive that would be required of the applicant to improve if a minor land division were to be granted. So essentially, we had to look at, where this was, and we had to look at findings of fact for variance to approve this. So first of all, I'll go through some of these. The first one is that there are special circumstances or conditions that apply to this site, and we do agree that there are, because along Riverside Drive there are improvements. There are city improvements. The city paved that street. It's just not to the current standard of a collector road, actually, that Riverside Drive is. It doesn't meet that, yet we still maintain it. And that's something that, in talking with Public Works, is almost more of a non-conforming pre-existing thing that we do on our side. It's already improved. It was done a long time ago. And in order to preserve those improvements, they overlay it regularly and have it part of that process. But this property is not anywhere, it's not near, the improvements required of this applicant are not near, they wouldn't connect up to other city improvements. So that is why we would say that box is checked there. The second one, the circumstances or conditions are such that strict application of the provisions of the code would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of such land or building. And again, here, if this variance application were denied and the applicant wanted to go forward with it, he would have to put in the 75 feet of improvement. But if you just visually, what that would look like is you would have, just ribbon pavement essentially, and then this 75 foot of full curb gutter and street improvement, and a big drainage issue, right? All of a sudden to neighboring properties that would need to be torn up anyway if Riverside Drive were to be improved to a full collector street status in the future, which we've been told is not part of any immediate plans to do that. So again, strict application would be taking money out of the applicant's pocket, and really long-term would be for naught essentially. I'll skip through some of these that are not applicable, but they are in your staff report. Just go to the last one. If the variance were granted, it would change the essential character of the neighborhood. We would say if it wasn't granted, it was change the character of the neighborhood. So we are ultimately recommending approval of this variance. However, with the requirement that the applicant enter into a delayed improvement agreement that is signed by the city as well, that would require him to pay for the improvements once they do come up in the future. When that happens, it's not looking like it's going to happen very soon at this point. I'll just say that. And that comes from the Public Works Department. But it is in there. It is to protect the city as well. The investment that the city has to do in order to pay. I mean, it's a tremendous investment, and we would like to recapture that if we were to approve this variance. So other than that, we did post this. We received 2 inquiries. None of them were negative to the project. They were just concerns. So as mentioned, our recommendation is to approve the variance subject to the conditions, which is the big one there is a delayed improvement agreement. And I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
So would the delayed improvement agreement carry on in the case of a new owner?
Yes, it runs with.
You transfer with the property. Okay. Any questions from commission? Mr. Gunnarsson, you want to?
I just
talk?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I did visit with my lawyer about it, and it would be if the property was sold or passed on, it would be encumbered into that piece of property. And I think that's all I have. And I appreciate Phil. It's appreciation, all the work they've done.
Thank you. Thank you. Any final questions, comments from commission? Okay, is there a motion on the floor?
I move to approve the requested variance from Laramie Municipal Code subsection 15.06.060.q subdivisions, minor, based on findings of fact and conclusions of law and subject to staff's recommended conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jenna, second. Final comments? Seeing none. Roll call vote, please.
Evans,
Yes.
Matamore is absent. Heisler White, O'Toole,
Aye.
Priscillic,
She's, you're muted, Sylvie.
Priscillic,
Aye.
Schneider is absent, and Moody.
Aye.
That is 5 yeses, 0 no, and 2 absent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Is there a motion to adjourn, as Board of Adjustment? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those nay? None? Okay, we're done. Long night, but we got her done. Thank you.